Okay, now we're live. November the 12th, 2025, Infinite Plane Radio. I started a moment ago, but the Bluetooth had caused the audio not to be heard. No big deal. We're just a couple of minutes late. We're on YouTube, DLive, and Twitter. And soon we'll be expanding to something like 8 platforms. Phone numbers on the screen, 505-510-4226. We've tried it a few times. It sounds loud and clear. We've only had to mute one person so far. So if you want to call in, phone number is available. And also Discord for those of you who are out of range. You can just go into the Discord voice chat. So we have a lot to talk about, obviously. We started off the week Monday with Fakeologist, the 1-hour show, and we took a number of calls. And that's been very helpful in this time where I haven't had phones to be able to interact. And we've covered quite a bit. One of the things that I thought was kind of funny is I think Governor Newsom made this meme, and it went on Drudge, and it was of Trump as Marie Antoinette, let them eat steak. And it all ties into the class warfare, the lavish White House parties, contrasted with the SNAP benefits being pulled for Thanksgiving. It's all designed to match this class warfare story they have set out here. And we were just talking about how No Kings was going on. No Kings protests as the crown jewels were stolen from the Louvre, as Fakeologist had brought up. And then we find out that Lupin, the Netflix show at the same time, had an episode about Marie Antoinette's necklace being stolen, which I said is relevant because she lost her head during a previous No Kings protest. So it's funny that Trump is being characterized as a Marie Antoinette. It's very fitting. What are your thoughts on Pluribus? Yeah, I think it's intriguing. I'm only on one. I mean, I have to rent the whole thing. What is it? HBO. I'm already paying Netflix because they pickpocketed me in my sleep. They e-grabbled me. But I did watch the first episode. It's filmed here. I recognize the locations. And then I heard the zip code. I mean, the area code. They were like 505. They were calling the emergency. And I was like, wait a minute. And someone did say it was by the same director, I think, that did Breaking Bad. It's real. It's not AI. Did you hear like this new country music song? Some AI slop is like the top country music song in the world right now. People are mad about it. It's like you're mad because your bad music is now being made by a computer. Apple TV, only 2 episodes. Okay, I'm probably going to follow through with it. So for those of you who don't know, the show Pluribus, it's spelled with a 1 in the middle instead of an I. And it's about this signal from outer space, which creates this hive mind where everybody's in a hive mind except for the protagonist and 12 others that she has to find. Someone brought it up because they said it's similar to the off-world stage, how everybody does have a hive mind. They live in this Truman Show, the mass agreed upon collective delusion. And then, about a dozen of us have, kind of slipped out. I mean, it's more than that now, obviously. And I'm very optimistic about the numbers, by the way, and moving forward. The more we get into history bending, the more we go down the PSYOP by PSYOP and break it down in terms of the propaganda content, who's involved, how it connects to other projects, the more I'm confident that we're making some serious progress here to making the case that our history is being proactively manufactured and performed in front of us so we can internalize it. But that we live in something that's even more ghastly than 1984, except it's less oppressive because it's Brave New World. That's where we're at. That expression, Brave New World, comes from Tempest, by the way. Shakespeare's The Tempest, which has been a topic as of late. I mean, the show The Tempest isn't based on Shakespeare, but the name kind of recalls that. Jamarian May says, Rick Beto had a whole segment on the AI song being #1. Well, I tried it. I tried to upload some AI slop onto Spotify just for clicks, and it blocked me. So I don't know how that one slipped through the cracks. And this isn't the first time, and I don't really have a problem with it at all. mean, people can tell. And if people like it, then what are you going to do? I feel the same way about AI art. In fact, if anything, it's enhanced what I do. Look at the thumbnails. Look at everything. Everything I send out, AI art. It doesn't stop me from doing the real stuff, but oftentimes I use it for composition, for ideas. I find it to be very useful. Although I tend to paint out of my head these days, but my cyborg penguins, yeah, those are definitely AI enhanced, just full disclosure. I found a local indoor flea market here where I can put up my artwork for the weekend and I don't have to be there, which is perfect. So we're going to see how the general population likes the cyborg penguins. Yeah, the northern lights, the sky is going to be red to the north again. I'll probably take a trip and take, I'm outside of town. I could probably get a spot where there's no light pollution. Yeah, King Ravana, the next batch of cards will come through as soon as I have the shipping costs. But the cards have been developed up to 48. And I have a lot of ideas that have been sent to me for future cards. Jamarian May says, remember when Ivanka told us we were entering a brave new world? Yeah, 2020 really was an eye-opener for me because what it indicated was how ubiquitous this whole thing is, that no country stands up to a PSYOP, that everybody's complicit. It's a PSYOP world order. What's up, Sprightly? Thanks for joining. Someone says analog is always preferable. Well, apparently a lot of AI coloring books are doing well. I don't know about literature. I mean, who's going to say? You're supposed to disclose. And from what I understand, Kindle does a lot to push back against AI slop because it actually is that easy to create a novel and publish it without even really reading it. I mean, yeah, and by the way, if you're waiting on the PSYOP trading cards, all of the orders are processed. I just halted the store so there wouldn't be any more orders taken in, but I have them all. So if you don't know about the PSYOP trading cards, they're sort of like the Illuminati playing cards, but these ones are from an off-world stage perspective. So we're not just promoting these various conspiracy theories that are safe to promote, but they're in fact taken from the off-world stage perspective. One of them was concurrent programming, for example. We need to do one on Candace Owens and the paved rabbit trails, next squibs. I mean, the whole next batch we have cut out for us just with these recent events. But what we want to do is we want to turn every PSYOP into basically a collectible trading card. What's up, P. Trippa? Donna says, it was red here last night. Yeah, when you look at your phone camera or you photograph it through your phone, you'll see more of it than you will with your naked eyes. I'm going to drive up to the top of there's a spot right off of, I think it's 333 Tramway. But the PSYOP trading cards have tremendous potential because the marketing is really just built in. The people who will want these, like who doesn't want a playing card with Jim Carrey taking off a Joe Biden mask or CIA spooks putting on alien masks or astronauts fooling around in front of a green screen? It's just bad sci-fi right now. Have you noticed the Chinese space station? I had high hopes. I thought, oh man, they're going to make the ISS look dumb and they're going to have to dump the thing. Then they bring it out and it's like they ordered the ISS on Temu. Well, the capsule got dinged by probably a Starlink. I don't know. They said space junk hit the capsule. So now the 3 astronauts up there are stranded. Diana says, I want stickers. Oh, yeah. In fact, I do have a print on demand set up for the stickers, but I want to order them and have them in inventory. I don't want to be at the mercy of third-party printers. So I'm getting into an office space probably in about 10 days, at which point I will resume in-house inventory. I've been trying to figure out how I was going to make this happen, and eBay's been, it's a mix because I sell very well on eBay. My store has great ratings, 100%. more like 1,800 sales in a couple of years, but it has not been profitable. The shipping's too high, and there's been no traffic. And I'm not blaming eBay in particular, but I just think things have changed. So I decided to go local. I'm only doing local sales. And I found so far a number of places where I can put stuff on consignment if I do certain styles, and we'll see. But I'm not quitting the art, I'm just quitting selling art on eBay. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with eBay, but I might just use it for selling my books and PSYOP trading cards to get cheap shipping rates so I can make them available internationally without having to charge you a ton. All right, let's see here. Jamarian says, Garbage Pail Kids still reign supreme. We could kind of create something like that. We can use that. I mean, I'm using AI for these cards. So I can say, in the style of Garbage Pail Kids, give me an image of Tucker Carlson having his back clawed by an alien demon that sort of resembles Candace Owens, and it would do it. Wayne Dion says, International Scuba Station. Yes. The space station is a reality TV show. I mean, it's pretty bad. I wonder how these astronauts remain so robust. Like the one guy, what's his name? Butch. You know, one of the guys who was stranded up there. I'm like, how is he so, thick? He hangs upside down and you see a vein on his forehead and his face. He looks like a sumo wrestler all of a sudden. I'm like, okay, how much astronaut food can they actually eat? It's just like Go-Gurt. It's like stuff in packets. And they all fill out really nicely. And I'm just thinking that's a little shady. And then I see one of them, I think she was the captain, the one who went around the earth for 666 days, Peg Whitson. It's like, okay, she got Botox in space, hair dye. Like they're all shaving every day. That's got to be a mess in space. I just think it's very unbelievable. The only ones I find believable are Suni Williams and Don Petit. Like they look the way astronauts should look. It's kind of ascetic. These other guys look like just they're eating a regular diet, and I just don't think that's possible. One of the things that has characterized the ISS bloopers from the beginning, though, has been the introduction of augmented virtual reality. I mean, on Earth Day, it was pretty funny when they dropped the globe and it fell. But the ABR stuff, where microphones go through necks, where heads go through ceilings, stuff that they can't just deny. And the ones that you see from the private stations are terrible because they don't even put any effort into it. They sent Kate Perry and her friends into space. Lauren Sanchez, Kate Perry, what's her name, Gail King, and some other one. And they go up into space and you don't have their faces melting with the G-force. That's a red flag. That suggests hoax. And then when they're in space, it's all jump cuts. So you don't actually see them levitating. You don't see Kate Perry levitating like she simulates on stage with ropes and stuff. Way better than this. All you see is for a second she's there and they cut and they cut and they cut. And they didn't use hairspray. So why is it on the ISS their hair is always standing up, or even parabolic flights? But no, their hair was all flat. So the hair screwed it up, largely, for me anyway. But it convinced Jaronism. He thinks Kate Perry went to space. Jamarin says, have you thought about starting a satire magazine on the inverted world like Mad Magazine? Oh, yeah, the IPS Insider. We already have it. We already have a printer, and the press club is going to be responsible for distribution. So we do have a tabloid. I've done a couple of test runs. Just needs a working capital of about just $300 or $400 a month, and I can turn it back on. The IPS Insider, INCITER. And it's basically a tabloid from the off-world stage perspective. So we're not making stuff up like Bigfoot, but we are talking about events from this particular perspective, including mind maps. I mean, really, there's no cap on it. We have a lot of ideas. And it wasn't the first time. We've ran a few trial runs with tabloids, and I think tabloids are the way to go for a few reasons. One of them is that I think we do need to have a tangible presence in the real world. And then two, as far as networking goes, I can use it for cross promoting, and I'm only interested in cross promoting those who share our perspective. And I'm talking about a perspective that isn't center world stage. And we have a lot more people, I've noticed, than ever before who are picking up on media fakery, but they just don't have a context for it because they're lost in Trutherville. And I think the tabloid could be instrumental in consolidating a lot of our research in a tangible way and creating a good environment for networking. Because there has to be a platform for the people who aren't buying into the duopoly. I mean, alt and mainstream are two sides of the same coin. And it's very obvious right now. And we have to take advantage of the fact that it's very obvious right now. Pete Ripa said the government was shut down for 43 days, just shy of 42. Yeah, I think 43 is the new 42 and 34 is the new 33. We figured them out. Lean Dion says Tucker just did a chemtrail episode. Oh my God. Tucker is the most disingenuous, gaslighting troll on the internet. And what they're doing here is like, I think it's cognitive sabotage, because now he's lending credibility to the whole chemtrail thing. And then the chemtrail people are going to come in here saying, you're gatekeeping chemtrails. Somebody said I was a transhumanist and then I'm gatekeeping chemtrails. Well, chemtrails don't exist. And when I said I was a transhumanist, I was joking about how I would let Elon Musk put a Neuralink in my head. Weren't they killing monkeys in their tests anyway? But no, to get back to the chemtrail thing, this is basically a form of target marketing of their ideology, because you might laugh at chemtrails or think it's ridiculous, especially when the fanatical ones boil vinegar to like dissipate it. But the fact of it is, chemtrails is to the far right what CO2 is to the far left, what climate change is to the far left. These are actually parallels. And so they're not actually chemtrail believers. The proper category would be anti-geoengineering. So anti-geoengineering on the right, climate change on the left. So the reason why Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson push chemtrails and aliens or demons is because it's part of where they are on the political horseshoe. But they're pandering to their base. And you notice how the environmentalists have always been depicted as like environmentalist wackos. And that's what Limbaugh called them, wackos. They've never been thought of as sane. They glue themselves to planes. They vandalize art. They lay in the streets. They play dead. Extinction Rebellion. The climate change people have always been unhinged. And we see the exact equivalent with the chemtrail people. They're unhinged. What they won't do, and I use it to diagnose something, because it tells us, okay, you can't see through loaded questions. You fall for faulty causality, and you make appeals to ignorance. And I think the last one, and we're just talking about the ways that these things get smuggled into someone's head. You're comfortable with this appeal to motive. Like, oh, the bad guys are so bad, why wouldn't they do this? Like, there's this worldview that goes into it, but also falling for these logical fallacies. Those are red flags that the person is just still programmed. There's no chemtrails off-world stage. And if you're pushing chemtrails, it's not just that you believe that planes are leaving these trails, but you're an anti-geoengineering person. And anti-geoengineering is based on a misunderstanding of what geoengineering actually is. And none of them can be bothered to do the research. And every time somebody brings it up, I say, can you predict them? And they say no. And I say, you can predict condensation trails. So what does that tell you? The fact you can predict condensation trails, persistent ones, and you cannot predict chemtrails, and yet the chemtrails are what they say the contrails are, Well, then one of them has a predictable model, and the explanation for that one should be accepted. The explanation for condensation trails is well understood: altitude, low temperatures, hot exhaust, moisture, condensation, ice. The chemtrail explanation is some kind of mysterious injection, but there is no substance you could fit into an airplane that would allow you to make these thick plumes of trails in the stratosphere for hundreds of miles. I mean, they would run out of chemtrail juice. Where would they put it? You've never seen an airplane putting chemtrail juice in some compartment. It's a very disingenuous and dishonest proposition pushed by shills because it's a big tent. If you can get somebody to fall for that, then you can already lump them in with other things as well. Because ultimately, they point fingers at secret government projects at the left, at the government, pro-government side. So to be a chemtrail believer is to also have this scapegoat that the government's destroying the climate. Whereas on the left, they say the climate's being destroyed by capitalism and by the right-wingers. So anyway, if you want to get yourself caught up in a Hegelian dialectic where you agree with the other side, but you disagree on whose fault it is, be my guest. It's all mind war. Chemtrails on your brain. Oh, and this is terrible. Yeah, Lean John says, speaking of climate trails, yep. Hibbler's documentary, him and the Flat Earth Millionaire, he's like in disguise. He grew out a Ted Kaczynski beard, but he's like saying that there's climate trails. I'm like, oh, chemtrails, climate change, climate trails. I mean, that's good SEO, good keyword grab. And I think what they're trying to do is, again, they're promoting this idea of HARP and weather weapons because it feeds into all these psyops. You'll notice this pattern. Like when Maui had the fires, when anybody has major fires, left wing says, oh, this was caused by the right wingers overusing fossil fuels. And the right wing will say, no, that was done by direct energy weapons and secret government weather modification. So you have these ready-made explanations. So if there's some kind of crazy weather event tomorrow, just you'll know everybody in the right's going to say weather weapons, and they're going to cite government docs. And everybody in the left is going to say, no, this was obviously caused by climate change. But there's money in it. There's a lot of money in pushing that stuff, apparently. Fear porn sells. And yeah, Hibbler Productions, they're grifting on this, or I think there's something a little more, I'm not gonna say sinister, but I think they essentially work for you might as well say mainstream. They're controlled opposition. Ollie says boil vinegar to disinfect it. Yeah, the thing is too, is they're falling for some simple tricks. So one of the tricks they'll say, and I used to get these calls all the time. People would call in and they'd say, well, I watched these planes and I checked on my tracking device and my app and they weren't being tracked. So these are secret government planes and they left lines in the sky. And 2 hours later, the whole sky was blocked, white, and you couldn't see the sun. I've heard that same anecdote from like 1 million people. And I just stop. The lines in the sky happen before the sky gets gray and it rains. Therefore, the lines brought the rain. The chemtrails brought the rain. That's the faulty causality. And they all fall for it. No, the truth of it is the trails indicate the climactic conditions and suggest that it might be likely to rain. But it says more, just about the thought process that goes into it. And I'm saying that this is intentionally created. This is all misdirection and manipulation. Girl says, Pentagon document called Owning the Weather by 2025. Yeah, you can cite Pentagon documents if you want, but here's why that's basically chicken feed. Because if you're on the left, you trust the government, and they tell you it's done by overuse of fossil fuels. But on the right, if you're conspiracy oriented, you won't trust anything from mainstream science. But guess what you will trust? Leaked documents, Pentagon documents. So it's reverse psychology. They got you to believe in it using reverse psychology. But the direct energy weapon thing versus climate change is a predictable template. Or when there's a shooting, the left wing will say it was caused by gun culture, the right wing will say it was caused by antidepressants. If phones are open, 505-510-4226. So what else have we been discussing as of late? The psyops are going to probably chill out, I would say, until maybe after Black Friday. I'm not expecting anything big. So this is a great time to catch up on research. Discord has been very active. And I have seen some pretty, like I said, there's a lot of accounts. There's one called Here Comes Trouble, Kellen, Helen Mosher. I've seen these accounts where on Twitter where people are, in fact, noticing that the whole thing is fake. So I just see this as a good opportunity. I don't think we've had such a great opportunity since the fake killing of Nipsey Hussle to expand the discourse. Linda Curtis says, white papers, white coats. Yeah, it's an appeal to authority. Oh, it's on the government dock, so it's true. Oh, so now we believe the government. But it's reverse psychology because they leave it on the ground. Like the truther won't believe it if you hand it to them. They'll say, oh, this can't be true. It's from the government. But if they find it on the ground on a rabbit trail, they'll say this must be true because it's leaked. It's clever. This is how they disseminate information to the alt media. They tap into this marketing tactic of letting the customer discover it. Let them think it's their own choice, that they chose it, that it wasn't actually planted. I trust them as much as I trust manifestos. And these days, they're really bad about it. They're using Chat GPT. Girl says, we're paying for it. The government spends it. Yeah, that's true. We pay for the bread and circuses, and we pay the salaries of the bread and circus clowns. I'm not sure if I'm mad about it or not. I mean, at this point, I'm just not, I guess I'm detached. I'm not apathetic. If I was, I wouldn't be paying attention. I would just say, oh, look, humanity's been mentally enslaved. LOL. And I would move on. But I'm not apathetic. If anything, I've become really focused on this thing, which I consider to be a philosophical crisis. That we have collectively entered into this new potential dark age because we have been robbed of the ability to see the difference visually, to discern between real and fake, which is a form of illiteracy. And it creates this power imbalance that we've all been now subject to. We've been hoodwinked. So you can no longer rely on your own senses to navigate this. We're basically blindfolded, hoodwinked. The wool's been pulled over our eyes. That's what generative AI has become. That's what it has led to. And it's not going to go back. Like, we can't reverse this. It's only going to get better. So we have to plan for it, which is why I introduced the concept of the blindfolded skeptic. I said, if you're going to analyze a staged event or a hypothetically staged event, like maybe it is, you can't just say it looks fake. Look at the screen. I would say, no, put on your blindfold, just focus on the narrative, the story, the media ecosystem, how it's being processed, who's involved, left, right opinions, hoax indicators. And when you look at the broader picture, you should be able to discern whether or not it's real or fake. Because if we solely rely upon the visuals and that's your MO, if that's your main technique, then you're going to be phased out. Your insights will not be valuable in a few weeks. Girl says all news is fake. No, I wouldn't say that. I especially would not say that because that's a straw man used against skeptics. Oh, you guys think everything is fake. I'm like, no, you think everything's real. What we're saying is that the small percentage of simulated events are the ones that steer history in the making. The guideposts on our timeline, those are the fake things. That's it. 95% of the news can just be reporting on traffic, reporting on weather, local interviews with politicians and business. Like, there's no reason to say it's all fake. That's not a good approach. We have to be specific here. So I'm very conservative about it. I'll say 1% of the news consists of staged events, but it's these small subset of news stories that hog the spotlight, that everybody bounces off, all the podcasters talk about. It's the fake events, like look at the Charlie Kirk thing, that dominate the headlines, and all the editorials bounce off of it. So it essentially it permeates the entire media ecosystem. So we don't have to say it's all fake. We just say the fake stuff is fake. News is fakeable. Media is a good liar. So a good liar doesn't lie with every breath, because then they would be a crazy person. A good liar lies strategically for advantage to those who already trust them. Media is an excellent liar, very Machiavellian. However, that having been said, the worldview and the perspective media has is built upon the premise that what came before is true. So they rest upon previous fake news. So it's accurate to say that they're by default liars, that, yeah, it's all lies, in a wider sense. But we have to be specific and nuanced here. We are high information disbelievers, as opposed to low information disbelievers. And lately I've been making the point here that straw man arguments are worthless, especially today with Perplexity AI Pro subscriptions available on trial for a year. We shouldn't be low information on any of these claims that we make. And when people attempt to dispute your claim with a straw man, it just shows that they don't use a lot of information. They're just dismissing it. But I think our approach should actually be focused on getting the most information and building the strongest version of your opponent's argument or the other claim, and then taking that apart. Paradoxymoronic says the programmers like to say based on a true story inspired by real events to help reinforce the psyops. Yeah, and I think that a lot of this content they contribute to that. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, it's 91 Okie. How are you doing?
91 Okie, thank you for calling. Make sure everyone can hear you okay. Okay, go ahead. Full volume.
I was just curious what you thought about the lights the other day. They were going on last night.
The Northern Lights?
Across America, yeah.
Right. I heard some people suggesting that the word on Truther Street is that it's HARP and some kind of weather weapons, but I haven't really thought too much about it. What do you think? Do you think this is a natural occurrence? Do you think it's some kind of other thing?
I heard somebody say that it might be just radiation amped up, and that's why they have to pick it up on that filter. Because I heard you have to use a filter to take the picture like that. But I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's how it was last time as well. You can get more of it on your iPhone camera, but yeah, I guess I'll have to look closer at it. I plan to go take a look later tonight, and then I'll have a better answer for you tomorrow. But I'm in a place where there's very little light pollution, and if I just drive a couple miles, I'll have a pretty clear view. I'll take some pictures.
All right.
Hey,
that's about it. Thank you, man.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the Atlas 3i?
I haven't looked into it, so I don't have an opinion.
Yeah, I figured it was a big nothing burger in space, but no, I haven't heard anything about that. I'm just curious. All right, well, thanks for the call.
All right, man. You have a good night.
You too. Ollie Goering says, weed, grow lights, bat signal. You know, I can actually I'm near this place. I was like a mile, 2 miles away from a farm where they're growing weed for some dispensary, and I caught it on a breeze. Reminds me of this terrible SNL skit. Something smells good in Stinkville with the cat. I don't even. Saturday Night Live used to be like stupid funny. I mean, I don't know if it is now. I heard it's all very much political. I rarely watch it. When I see these late night TV shows, these like talk shows, it just seems like they use laugh tracks and applause and then like maybe a 2 minutes of hate like setup to kind of establish what is and isn't acceptable discourse, what isn't funny, who we should hate, who we should like. It just seems like too much opinion management. GMO weed says truth hurts. Yeah, isn't it interesting though how that's suddenly everywhere? Like I don't know where you are, but it seems like every other gas station here has been converted into a dispensary. Paradoxy says space chorizo. Yeah, that was an eye opener. So if you don't know about the space salami or chorizo, basically some scientist connected with the James Webb Telescope, which costed like $1 billion. He put a slice of meat on a picture of stars. He photographed it, and they said it was a newly discovered star 4.2 trillion light years away. And it went viral. People said it was beautiful. Scientists, astronomers, people are gushing over this beautiful discovered star's red star. And it went mega viral. Every single person that saw it just retweeted it. And then a few days later, he apologized and he said this was actually a chorizo put on a map of the galaxy. And I said, hey, this should illustrate something to us. How much people are ready to believe whatever they see. Like we have a problem here with credulity, and this is obviously easy to exploit. And we'd be naive to think that it hasn't already been exploited because people will believe anything. And this was before generative AI went mainstream. Like we have no chance. They're going to go ahead and colonize Mars. Nothing you can do about it. When I mean colonize Mars, I mean they're going to simulate it at the Vegas sphere, and then it's just going to be real. Because that's where we're at right now. It's real if the consensus believes it is. Lean Dion says, I wonder where Starman is now. I wonder why it isn't live streaming. Yeah, Starman, anagram for Mr. Satan, based on David Bowie, the man who fell to earth with a lightning bolt on his face, with Elvis's birthday. The whole thing was, to me, that was cognitive dissonance. When they did this PR stunt with the car in fake space, I was like, oh, they just overplayed their hand. This is going to cause people to really fundamentally question a lot of what we have been shown from the space agencies. And I was fully expecting that there was going to be a backlash, like an intellectual revolt. And then somebody said to Elon Musk, what do you think about all these people saying it looks like CGI? And he's like, well, it must be real because it looks so fake. Suggesting that if they were going to fake it, it would look worse. I don't know. I don't know. His reasoning was just, it was like kind of like a thought blocking statement that he made. It was bizarre. It was wizardry. Oh, it must be real because it looks so fake. And we're all like, yes, war is peace. Freedom is slavery. It must be real because it looks so fake. He 1984'd us. Some kind of meme warlock. And it got a pass. Nobody questioned it. And so for a few days, I just found it to be jarring because I thought I was going to change things. I thought, well, people are going to see through it. Then I realized, no, people will believe anything. They're in the magic show. And it's not that there's anything wrong with them. It's that if you're at a magic show and you stay in your chair, you can't see through the magic tricks. And in the same way with media, if you take it at face value, you're not going to be even suspecting media fakery. That's not really part of your assessment. You just believe the magic. Truth Hurt says, I wonder what the Starlink sats really are, balloons or something. else. Well, have you seen Loon X? Look into Loon X and see what you think. Because Loon X was essentially that, sat of loons. And then they terminated it. And then Starlink comes out of nowhere. I'm like, interesting timing. Copaesthetic says, it must be true because it sounds like a lie. Must be a lie because it sounds so true. Right. Well, even if space is real as believed, it doesn't mean that what we're shown from the space agencies is real, because it could just as easily be a false cover. Maybe they're hiding a continent, because whatever we're shown from the ISS, it's a computer model. If you're not familiar with Smudgegate and the ESA's use of a shadow that shouldn't exist for the ISS on the Earth, it's 285 miles up. You should not see a black dot tracking along with it. And we'll deal with the ISS. I mean, if you believe in it, that's the best you can say. You believe in it. It's an article of faith. You don't know it to be true because you would have to confront a lot of these hoax indicators. I'm glad I don't have to defend that crap. But it's not as embarrassing as the Chinese space station, but they're both pretty bad. And now they're going to start doing private space stations. If I was into practical jokes and hoaxes, I would team up with some AI people, some experts in the field, and I'd say, hey, let's create a space agency, a rogue space agency. We will launch CubeSats. We will send bots up that will remotely assemble a space station, a private getaway, and we'll rent it like an Airbnb in space to billionaires. And then we would have like AI billionaires buy the tickets, go to space, and they would see the exact same graphics that NASA shows us. And how could anybody call it fake? How could you call my space agency fake if it looks real? Because that's the standard for believability. If it looks real, it must be real, right? I saw it on the screen. It looks real, so it's real. We can make it look at, I could make a space station using Gemini. I could make one more believable than Kate Perry's trip to space. But my point is, if you put up equivalent evidence, and if it looks better even, what is their basis for calling it fake? If they called it fake, I would say, what are you, a flat earther? And then we're in on the grift. We're on the space grift. Now, all of a sudden, we can pre-sell tickets, and we don't even have to deliver. You see, we pre-sell 100 tickets, and the first 3 flights are AI people who don't even exist. And then on the third one, we have it blow up. So I'm sorry. But if you want to just let us hang on to your ticket fare, we'll continue our developments. And then you just delay it into perpetuity. I think that's what Elon Musk has done. Hasn't he already sold tickets to Mars? Donna South Art says, I'm starting a space junk pickup service. Yeah, I've had that idea. I called this installation at White Sands. It's this DARPA installation where they track space junk, and they're tracking like 3,000 pieces of space junk. I called them up and I said, I have this idea for an orbiting trash compactor that uses electromagnetism to draw in space junk, compact it into cubes, and then fling it out to the moon for the future moon base, just raw materials. And they said, there are some regulatory issues I would face, but they said the main issue here was that it would be illegal for me to touch somebody else's space junk, like China's, Russia. It could create an international incident. So I was told by them that I cannot get into the space junk reclamation business. M. Smith says, India's moon landing is easily shown as computer graphics. Well, one thing you have to be careful about is that when they do moon landings, they show you a cartoon of it landing, because you can't actually see it landing, but they want you to know real time. So you're actually shown a real time simulation. Do you remember when they did Artemis? NASA created a video of the Artemis rocket going around the moon, and they put a disclaimer, this is only an animation. We haven't done this yet. And I was like, why do they have to put a disclaimer on there? Well, it's because their graphics are now as good as the real thing. So they have to tell us that this one's fake, but the next one's going to be real. Truth Hurt says, I want to know where my 2K tariff stimmy check is. I don't think you're going to get any government money, but I think it's fascinating how that went. Like the same people who think that EBT should be canceled are like, yeah, government money, because it's from Trump. What if he just sent you some Trump NFTs instead? That's more his style. I remember after January 6th, there were so many QAnon hopefuls, and they're like, Trump's going to come out with JFK Jr., and he's going to take back power and expose the deep state. So Trump finally comes out, and he's like, I got these new NFTs. And then he comes out with his golden boots. But there will be no Doge checks. There will be no stimmies. And the stimmies that you got, that was actually your pay. They have to pay you if you're going to be an actor on the world stage. If you're going to be conscripted as a crisis actor, you do have to get paid. And so that's why you got the stimmy checks. So I used mine. Everybody around me was locked down. I used mine to go to Roswell, New Mexico. Nobody was on the road. I just drove along. It was just like empty. And I went to Corona Field. Corona Field is where the aliens landed in Roswell. And at the time, we were just talking about the connections between alien invasions and this idea of the virus, these overlapping themes in media, inner space, outer space. The way that they tell us these stories. Like, for example, I'm pretty certain now that decades of alien invasion entertainment has been to condition us for a higher intelligence taking over. But the higher intelligence that's going to take over is not going to be green men from Mars. It's not going to be the reptoids or the Pleiadians. It's going to be AI. The alien invasion was always AI. Because it's inevitable now that smarter than really anybody that's presently in government, there's going to be these smarter than anybody else that we know, AI agents who are just now ready to work for us without any of the drawbacks that human beings have. They're going to cure some things, do some miracles, whatever it does. I think we're going to bow down to the higher intelligence, but it's not going to be aliens. It's going to be AI. And this also might correlate with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and others claiming that AI is in fact demonic and aliens are demons. So it all kind of ties together neatly. The idea is a higher authority is going to arrive and we are all going to kneel before it. And it won't be by force. We'll volunteer. We will basically worship it or something. I think it's coming. 91 Oki says Raelian AI. Did the Raelian cult have anything to do with AI? I know they claimed that they were cloning humans. I got their book. I think it was called Geniocracy. And it was about this idea that we needed to find the most intelligent people in the world and have them run everything. I read their manifesto, but I think they claimed something about an origin from the Dog Star or Sirius. A reoccurring theme. Even David Icke claims that the reptilians came from Sirius, which is the star that figures pretty prominently in many of these occult religious traditions. And in Hollywood, you know, aside from the PSYOP-oriented predictive programming, there's a lot of subtext that points to what we would generally call, the occult or pagan. For example, Jim Carrey in his movies bringing out the messaging, like the Masonic stuff, the Dog Star stuff. Side Girl says, Heaven's Gate, Marshall Applewhite. Well, that was Hale-Bopp. There's another cult. It was called the Solar Temple, like the Knights Templar Solar Temple cult. And I think 33 of them drank the Kool-Aid. And they said that they were going to hitch a ride on some comet. Somebody said that Marshall Applewhite was a character portrayed by Jim Morrison's father, by Admiral Morrison. I looked. There's a slight resemblance, but I don't know. I have to hear the voices. Sprightly says, a world run by compassion and wisdom might be nice for a change. Well, there's that 1969 David Bowie song, Save Your Machine, about President Joe handing over control to the savior machine that cures hunger and war and disease. And then you have Grimes talking about AI being used to perfect communism and get rid of systemic corruption so that nobody would have to work. She said, because forced labor is not a vibe. I remember her cadence was very musky. Grimey's very musky. Like she's been around Elon Musk and she's been listening to his cadence, the way she was speaking. So I assume that she must have overheard something. What would prompt somebody to talk about using AI to perfect communism and create this utopia, the workers' paradise, the utopia, whatever it is, where nobody has to work anymore, no forced labor? King Ravana says, nice shoes, applesauce, and vodka. That actually sounds nice. Side Girl says, worship the swoosh. So what is the swoosh? Is it Saturn's rings? I've heard that. We were talking about Saturn earlier. The way that Saturn has been represented in movies like Dark City and Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis or The Matrix. Well, we're talking about the iconography. It's the black clothing, the black rimmed hat, but its purview is control over time and restriction, space, the matrix, the cube. I think that's why in Westworld you have the man in black with the knife. That's kind of like Saturn, the Reaper with the sickle. Sovereign Gamer and Troublemaker, thank you for joining. So the other conversation we had after Kirk, I was like, finally, a plane crash can take our minds off of Erica Kirk and her love affair with J.D. Vance, which, by the way, ties into heads of state. But the plane crash thing, it was fascinating because you have the death, and this was pointed out. So we have Muhammad Ali Airport, and as JLB pointed out, it opened up on, it was titled that because it was renamed on January 16th, which is kind of a, 116, 911, because this whole event was 9/11 coded. So you've got the architect of 9/11, Dick Cheney, dying on the day the One World Trade Tower opened, 13 years after the twins went down. So November the 3rd. So Cheney dies November the 3rd. The next day, you have a plane crash, 9/11 coded. And my tweet has more than 500,000 hits. And all I said was, notice that UPS flight 2976 has the same number of 9/11 casualties. So already you have that. And then I looked into the rest of the report and like, well, it went 175 feet up. I'm like, oh, that's flight 175. And then the profile of it, hitting the building, in so many ways, it seemed to be mirroring a lot of the imagery of 9/11. So I jokingly said, this must be some kind of Viking tribute with a 9/11 theme, and Dick Cheney's likely in a dummy plane getting cremated. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but I'm just pointing out the ironic timing of Cheney's death in a plane crash was noted kind of widely. It wasn't just us. But then later that evening, the new mayor of New York happens to be someone that the right wing thinks is some kind of Osama bin Laden. So now the Twitter sphere is flooded with 9/11 imagery. So now whether or not you were looking at 9/11 stuff before that day, or making these connections with the plane crashing and Cheney, well, now 9/11 was a dominant conversation because Rudy Giuliani comes out and he's like, I guess you forgot New York. It was supposed to be never forget. And then you have Joint Air Force Base somewhere is like what, 7 people got white powder, like anthrax, 9/11 callbacks. 5 firemen in the Bronx get injured with this dramatic explosion where this car explodes. Then the FAA grounds like 1,000 flights. So flights being grounded, all kinds of 9/11 callbacks in the wake of Cheney's death on a 9/11 significant date, because ground zero, 113 New Tower. And then this mayor comes up bringing this other factor in. So the mayor, Cheney, the plane, all of these things seem to coalesce. And then the issues with the airlines shutting down. So what we were describing here, we have Muhammad Ali Airport, and they just arrested Muhammad Ali, the ISIS terrorist in Dearborn, Michigan. So if you look at these events in isolation, the mayor, the car exploding, the plane going down, Cheney dying, these are just disparate events that have no relation to one another. But if you look at it holistically as an intentionally created echo chamber, then you can see what we're looking at here and why we make these correlations. But I'm pointing out that my tweet making the 9/11 connection was before all the rest of the stuff. And I hadn't even connected it to Cheney at that time. What's up, Deprogrammed Truther? Thanks for joining. But that was like last week's news. But it was quite a lot. But before that, the PSYOP was the No Kings with the crown being stolen. And then before that, we had the Kirk thing. But the Kirk saga is ongoing. And we're watching Erica Kirk go from role to role, from Snake Eyes to The Tempest to Heads of State. And someone else shared in the Discord server the image of a scene from Americana, where the guy has the arrow in his neck in that exact spot. And again, Americana, Turning Point USA, MAGA, America Comeback. I was pointing out this morning that if you look at the Gestalt, what was the purpose of the CK thing? Well, it's a new JFK, but it's also about division and the split and the creation, the fomenting of a new conspiracy culture, like blowing that up again, because it's all controlled. They're redoing what they did after the JFK thing. But I was saying that the message here was killing Americana, or basically the idealized past, which is promulgated by the Turning Point USA. And then, of course, we tied in the Turner Diaries, how the Turner Diaries is about this Christian nationalist revolution after the martyrdom of the leader of the group. After he dies, it's called the Turning Point. And what happened after Kirk died? Well, it's been widely called the Turning Point. And I pointed out before that Turning Point USA was going to platform the Turner Diaries. So none of this was really a surprise to me as far as how this whole thing has been rolled out. '91 Okie says, did you see the video of TV saying for 15 years New York is too taxed? No, post a link. Not familiar with it. Breaking. 8 passengers taken to hospital after a people mover hits the dock at Dulles Airport in Virginia. Now, wasn't that an airport connected to 9/11? It's just been this theme. And I've used the phrase concerted messaging to describe this phenomenon of every possible propaganda outlet saying the same thing. So the JFK stuff was all over the CK thing. Especially in the wake of it, you had, Charlie, well, actually at the same time, you had Charlie Sheen talking about JFK and Lee Harvey Oswald on Joe Rogan, alluding to a sniping of Charlie Sheen, Joe Rogan saying good shot. Then they talked about the event. Roger Stone said Charlie wanted to call in and talk about the JFK assassination. And then we were looking at this video, this promotional video for Erica Kirk for her modeling agency, where it showed her playing basketball, college basketball. And it has her number 11, and the player next to her is 22. So 11, 22, again, she's this new Jackie Kennedy, the way they've even made these comparisons. There have been some statements that have been actually calling forth the Jackie Kennedy response to Jack Kennedy's death. All right. Phones are open if you want to call in, 505-510-4226. We went pretty deep into the mind map this morning with history benders, and I think I have a pretty good idea of where we're going to start with that. And I wanted to start with 9/11 stuff, but stuff where the Twin Towers go down. And we already started working on this, beginning with Super Mario Brothers, and then of course Fight Club. And we were talking about how Fight Club has the Century Plaza Twin Towers, same design, built to resemble the twins, but they show those in the background when he's talking about gelatin wrapped columns. And we've connected that to Gelatin B, which of course was this mysterious art group that was present in the towers leading up to the event. And if anyone can be pointed at as the demolition crew, the ones who maybe even filmed a lot of the content regarding jumpers and people at the window in advance, they would have done it. All right, so we're live on Twitch. Did we get cut off of YouTube or not? I'm not seeing, and then I'm checking on X. So you can also catch us live on X. There's not a chance in this world, says Trillion OX, that this giant cigar of a round got stopped in Charlie Kirk's neck. The only other report of a 3006 being found in the body was Martin Luther King. I think Martin Luther King also had a significant, I think he won some prize on 1014 with his Charlie Kirk Day, but yeah, another martyr connection. So I'm wondering now if our phones are down. Is anything up? Looks like the chat is down. I'm not sure, but something's going on. Let me go ahead and make an adjustment here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off DLive and turn on a backup YouTube channel. We'll see if that fixes it. I think we might have been taken offline. What would be the cause of that? Everything looks normal. All right, I don't know. Am I tripping here, or are we legitimately offline? All right, 28 viewers. Yeah, it looks like we're definitely having some issues. Okay, looks good. Okay, no big deal. It might be my internet connection on my laptop is lagging. Okay, chat is still good. Okay, just double checking. So we're going to add Kick. I'm trying to get on TikTok, but I have to have a certain number of hours. Odyssey. I don't know if anybody still watches Odyssey or listens on Odyssey, but that's another place where we will also be streaming. And of course, the 24/7 stream is almost there. We're at like 18 hours. And so after this, I turn that on, leave it on, recent replays for the night. Also, other content. We have some content from Armin Ra. We have some other archives that I'll be putting into the feed. And I'm also going to be recording our voice chats. So if you're involved in our voice chats in Discord, a lot of those are going to end up in the 24/7 replay. Going through recent tweets. The conspiracy theorizing around the Charlie Kirk thing has kind of been ongoing. And it's every day. Candace Owens creates outrage by implicating somebody else. And the net effect of it has been she's the #1 podcast in the world for some reason. And I'm saying this is intentionally generated noise. And the reason why is they want to dominate the conversation. Either Antifa did it or this other group did it, but they don't want into the equation the notion that it didn't happen. Tucker Carlson says that nuclear weapons are demonic, by the way. Demonic is trending. Have you all picked up on this trend with everything demonic? Candace Owens says demons are real. Elon Musk, Sam Altman, and Peter Thiel are demons. Like the demons are real thing is big. And it's not that hard of a sell for someone like Tucker to push this, in my opinion, because what you're really talking about is just rehashing a lot of the QAnon stuff. And those people really came to believe in vampire Democrats and satanic ritual sacrifices. So they buy anything. So now he was prompted, he was asked by, I think it was Megyn Kelly about this. And his explanation was that according to the Bible, demons take human form. They mate with humans. They take on physical form, and therefore it shouldn't have been a shock for him. It shouldn't be a surprise for us to hear that he was attacked by a demon. And he describes it as he thought he was going to die. He was bleeding all over the sheets. Yeah, I was just tripping. It wasn't me tripping, it was my Chromebook. But I'm making this work regardless. Chromebook, it has its limitations, but we can use it for voice. We can use it for phone calls. Cope says, gonna need Odyssey, yes. Yeah, Odyssey's good. And then what I also do, I upload to Odyssey, and from there, it gets blasted onto several podcast platforms. And if you want to know what podcast platform you can get us on, Spotify, Apple, Audacity, and a list of others, go to ips.monster. ips.monster has a list of all the different places, and of course the 24/7. So if you want to catch up, I'm going to put the 24/7 streaming up there, but there's also a link to it, and I am updating it. So it's going to be no repeats every 24 hours, and I'm going to be consistently cycling out the older content. So we're almost back to where we should be. We're not quite 24/7 uninterrupted, but it will get there. And what it's doing, though, is it is increasing the number of subscribers and the number of people in Discord, which is the objective. It really still is, quality is paramount here, but we do need numbers. And we're not creating an echo chamber, but we have to keep in mind that not all ideas are equally valid. Many ideas have nothing to substantiate them, no legs to stand on. And we're open to arguments that are contrary. I'm always fine with debate. I don't have any intention of trying to tell people what to think, and I'm certainly not a gatekeeper. I don't have the reach or the ability to gatekeep anything. We're kind of a small operation. But we do have a focus here. And one of our focuses as of late has been the recognition of perspectives. And these are, for the most part, unalterable. Like I talk to normies, people in Normieville, who are certain that Charlie Kirk was killed by Erica Kirk and Donald Trump. Like, it's so subjective. You can believe anything. But they would never entertain the idea he's not dead. Scrapper Bob says, "What's up? My scrapyard's still closed from the plane crash." Are you out there in Kentucky? Because you would be the third eyewitness. So one of our witnesses said his buddy had a video of it, and it wasn't 175 feet up, but later realized that his buddy's video was actually the one that we all saw. So again, we're right to question people claiming secondhand information, people claiming, I know somebody who knows somebody who saw the event. We're right to question it. One of the other comments that followed that one was somebody said they knew somebody whose coworker's son was 50 feet away from the airplane when it hit the ground. And I said this person was likely confabulating or lying because there's no evidence. And I was rebuffed. I was confronted about that. And this person said that I gave it too much time and attention, and that I could be shown the tweets to prove it. And I'm like, you know what? My take on it is this: Hitchens razor. If somebody makes an extraordinary claim and provides zero evidence, you can just dismiss it. Because I'm not even convinced that there would have been anybody in the area. Because, of course, we're talking about a closed movie set. So immediately I just disregarded that. And I haven't received any emails, and no one in the news have interviewed anybody that was 50 feet away from it. But it is an interesting phenomenon, and it's not new. Of people, like I used to have people saying, my relative died in 9/11. And every time I would say, what's their name? And they would draw a blank. I don't want to tell you. Well, don't you want their memory to live on? Give me the initials. They'd give me the initials. So I'd look it up on the database, and it's not there. So this is not a new thing. The mass media has actually reported on this too, where there are a lot of people who have made claims to being. I remember George Santos. He was like, yeah, my parents died. No, his grandparents died in the Holocaust. His mom died on 9/11. He died at Sandy Hook. Like, he just attached himself in a very personal way to every event. But when we get into it, when we get into the deconstruction of the PSYOP from the perspective of predictive concurrent programming and drills, it's going to be revealing. Like, how many famous celebrities had 33-year-old fathers that died there? Or how many weird anomalies like that, without even getting into the pictures, which is another area. I mean, September Clues has done a lot here. But there are a lot of questionable stories, aside from the predictive stuff. One of the more interesting examples to me is Collateral Damage, which was scheduled to come out in October. So there were billboards in New York around Ground Zero that had Arnold Schwarzenegger overlooking Ground Zero, Collateral Damage. The movie was delayed because it had too many scenes that had to do with terrorists doing 9/11-y stuff. So it was delayed for most of the year before they finally let it out. But the billboard was there. And in one of the famous handheld shots at 8:46 a.m., you see the explosion and the billboard's overlooking it. So sometimes it seems that the stuff that's meant to be concurrently released, the timing's off. It's like right after. So it's not always perfect, but it's conspicuously close. Yeah, Bob, if you want to call in, he says, it killed a bunch of scrappers that were unloading scrap. Glad I wasn't there that day. So this is funny because, I mean, funny, just like, it's just a little strange. Because, this is a small group, and yet this major event happens, and we've got 3 people who listen who are like directly attached to it. Like, that's great. Glad I wasn't there that day, says Scrapper Bob. Yeah, we'll take your word for it that Cheney's cremation, his cremation, didn't actually affect you. It could have, though. That burning plane that contained his cadaver. Well, JLB asked about this. So what is the premise here? If that event was fake and it was coordinated with Cheney, then it's safe to say that A, he's not dead, because of course you couldn't coordinate his death with such precision, or B, he was already dead. He was on ice. Yeah, if you want to call in, it's 505-510-4226. So you're saying you work at the Kentucky airport where the UPS crash 2976 happened. Maybe you know the guy that was 50 feet away from it. Did you know, were you part of it even, that days before there was a mass casualty disaster preparation drill at that airport involving 150 mass casualty actors? But yeah, call in. Call in if you're a 9/11 survivor, if you went to Sandy Hook, if you got hit by space junk. Like, if any of these world stage psyops personally crossed your path, call in. He says it wasn't fake as in it didn't happen. However, to me, it looks like they blew it up on purpose, if that makes sense. Well, that's what I'm suggesting. That a lot of the footage could be AI, could be fake. They could have made it during the drills. But when it came to the actual explosion and the smoke that was recorded, the most likely thing to me is pyrotechnics. Does it mean they flew a dummy plane? Not necessarily, because you could have the plane flight totally fake, the explosion easily real. Just like with East Palestine, Ohio. Did they really derail a train? Probably not. Did they have a big mushroom cloud of smoke? Yes. Pyrotechnics. So I don't think they really flew a plane. But do we believe you that you were there, or you were almost there, that you were late to work? How many of these celebrities were like maybe Michael Jackson was one. Then there was, what's his name? Who's the guy from the Orville? Seth Rogen or Seth Green? No, Seth Green. Let me get that name. Well, it's not important now, but there's a whole list. We'll get to these of celebrities who would have died if they had, like Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg is one. Celebrities who were going to take flights and who would have died on 9/11, but something they overslept. At the last minute, they were. Yeah, Seth MacFarlane. He was almost a 9/11. So you are a 11/4 survivor. Scrapper Bob is a flight 2976 survivor. I'm glad you made it. I'm glad you weren't killed. No, but to be honest, whenever they do these events, my starting point is that these are closed movie sets. Like, there were no collateral damage, unintentionally killed people on 9/11. People say, well, there had to have been some people who would have cleared the sets. Infinite Plane Radio. Hey, what's up? Is this Scrapper Bob?
No, sorry. This is Mike from The Hobbit.
Oh, what's up, Mike?
Yeah, you were talking about some of these incidents that happen, on the world stage. To call in, you remember that? I forget what year it was, but remember when all the terrorist stuff, the supposed Muslims and all that was going on, and there was an incident in San Bernardino, and the two,
yes,
the husband and wife team, and they were being chased by the police and all that.
And then the news crew went into their apartment, and they're like, "Oh, look, it looks like pipe bombs." I was like, "Wait a minute, they're letting the media mess with the crime scene?" But yeah, this was the Muslim couple that murdered a bunch of people during the Christmas party.
Exactly. Okay, now here's the deal. I'm tracking with you. You've really opened my mind through the years with all this stuff. But this one right here, I've never had a chance to talk to anybody like yourself about. But there was a woman there, a girl there, who apparently was friends with the couple, because I believe the husband worked there, but the wife, she didn't, right?
Right.
Anyway, supposedly this girl put on like a baby shower for the wife, and she helped with the Christmas party and all this. And supposedly, when all this stuff went down, she left just before to go do something, and she ended up hiding in the restroom. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay, check this out. That girl, her father, went to the same church as my stepdad and mom, and told the story and said that she was so shaken up over it that she couldn't work anymore. She was seeing like a psychologist and all this stuff. So I saw the guy once, but I didn't want to go up to him and talk to him. We had, it was like a barbecue, and some of the church people were there, and he was there. So I don't know what to make of that. Either she really believed that it was real and it affected her, that way, or she was paid, and I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. So I just kind of like, kind of put it in the back burner of my mind, and
Right. Well, I think
I don't know what to make of it.
one thing we have to consider is when we entertain the notion that something is a psyop, we have to ask: is this an extraordinary claim? Was there a plausible story, and the coverage? So I'm going to have to go back and revisit the thing. I remember.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I do remember though how it was spun. For example, Bill Nye the Science Guy said it was caused by climate change, that we caused it. He said that because of our overuse of fossil fuels, we had to start war. We had to destroy their countries. We destroyed their economies. And because of climate change, they can't grow crops. So they get recruited by terrorist gangs. They come back over here and do stuff. He had this whole narrative about it. So I remember it was very much a talked about story. But yeah, I have to go back and see if it has the hallmarks of a hoax.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't go to that church. My stepdad just passed away. My mom has Alzheimer's now, last stages, so I can't really, question them about it. And plus, they're, they believe all this stuff. So
well, we should be able to tell just by looking at the context in which it took place. Yeah. And so what I'm saying is that what made me think it was a hoax was the way that the media was allowed to go into their apartment and go through their drawers and touch stuff. And it was like Scooby-Doo justice. They were solving it right there in front of us. But
now I don't remember, were there more than just that one person that survived? I don't remember.
I'll have to go back and look. So that's part of my homework. I'm putting on my notes here. I'll look at the San Bernardino terror attack.
Because I think everybody else was shot and stuff in the room, right? In that they were having a Christmas party, I think. And then supposedly she stepped out to go get something, and she heard shots, and she barricaded herself in the restroom. And then she came out, and I guess she, saw all that stuff.
Yeah, supposedly, right. I mean, it seems unusual. It seems unusual that, especially if she wasn't a crisis actor on TV. Like, you don't have crisis actors unless they're on TV performing. It's not like somebody in your own life would be connected to something like that.
Yeah. One more thing, Tim, for, I'm sure there's other callers. I've been wanting to ask you this for a long time. Okay, so, we got all this stuff going on, with the Charlie Kirk thing, for example. And then, there's many, many more. And then, the Netflix stuff and the Hulu stuff. And, things seem to, it kind of like foreshadows events to come and stuff. And you break it all down, and you can see similarities in all this. But why though? I mean, why do you think they do this? You know what I mean? Because it always seems like they're always one step ahead.
Okay, consider, why do they do behavior placement or product placement? Like, let's say, like thinking like Edward Bernays. If you want to get the public to adopt a new lifestyle trend, for example, carrying a phone everywhere, well, how do? You do it through marketing. And so part of the predictive programming is marketing ideas and events before they happen, how we're going to respond to them, how they're going to appear. So in a way, it's one, it's conditioning. Two, it's product placement, creates an echo chamber effect. And I think the main part of it is that it's influencing us to accept what is presented on the world stage when they fake it as real and the logical conclusion. We should have expected this. So it's like they set the stage, they make us suggestible, but I consider it to be a form of propaganda placement. And then the reason why is that every single fake event they get away with is added to our historic timeline. And the more you look at this, the more you see that events planned in advance that become a part of our historic timeline are the very things that allow them to steer our history. So, in other words, we're looking at a manufactured history being implemented day by day proactively through I guess, the mechanism of psyops, which include entertainment, which include this echo chamber effect. So it's an immersive echo chamber that they create.
But what? Okay, I can see the Edward Bernays and how he brought in the whole smoking for women, and I totally get all that. But say for example, like the Charlie Kirk thing, why would they do that? I mean, what are they trying to condition us to?
Okay, well, the Charlie Kirk thing, from what I see, one, it has the symbolism of, well, one, to maintain the status quo, maintain the mind war, the psi war, left versus right. So you have Antifa left taking out far right, or somebody on the right who epitomizes MAGA. And what is MAGA? MAGA is a return to Americana, idealized past. It's a worldview warfare thing. Turning Point USA, turning America back, America Comeback Tour. So it's this idea of returning to traditional values. And by shooting Charlie Kirk in the neck, it was shooting Americana in the neck. It's storytelling. And it's this savage story, the creation of a martyr, and the launch of this Christian nationalism. And
no, I can see that. I totally can see that.
And this was described by one of his friends, Jack Posobiec, as this event will be looked at by future historians as the turning point that saved Western civilization. So the point of this is these are plot points. These are plot twists. These are the events that steer us in the direction of the curated worldview, the pre-planned history.
Okay. Now, pre-planned history. Here's what I've been kind of wondering, and I wanted to run it by you. Do you think it is possible? Because you know how they have, the bread and circuses, the whole thing with sports and entertainment and movies and all that stuff, or even like the truthers, that we talk about that. They'll see the conspiracy, but they believe that people died and and all that. And they kind of run with it. It's like a whole other rabbit hole, right?
Right.
What if this whole deal with the media and the movies and it's just like another like throwing out bait, like another rabbit hole for us to get distracted and go down, and try to figure out the meaning of this movie and that movie and how it all fits in with Robert De Niro.
Well, yeah, I could answer that. This has already been done for decades, since 9/11.
What are they trying to do?
Okay,
I don't hear.
Okay, I got you.
Do you ever talk about like technocracy and all that other stuff? That it seems to be like that's what's happening. The digital ID and the technocracy. I mean, Trump, his cabinet is full of technocrats, from Elon Musk to J.D. Vance and his mentors.
Okay, I would say it's not a distraction. I would say that they use the distraction line that it's only a coincidence or it's evidence of a simulation. This has never been explained by anybody, not until us. And and what I'm saying, it's not a distraction because if true, then it completely invalidates the entire framework that mainstream media operates out of. So it undermines the authority of this worldview monopoly by exposing it. So this isn't like it. My point of view, what I'm espousing here, is not shopped around. It is not platformed. It's not talked about. The
Right.
only way they talk about it is they'll talk about snake eyes and a weird coincidence, but they won't talk
Right.
about the real-time alignment of entertainment being used to reinforce psyops. I mean, look at entertainment as psyop reinforcement. Like running up to 9/11, every other movie was about terrorists flying planes into buildings.
Right.
So what they're doing is they're conditioning us to accept these things as inevitable. It's bread and circuses is part of the government's structure.
Right.
And so what I'm suggesting here too is that the technocracy, transhumanism, AI, this is part of the dialectic between the progressive nightmare and the traditional values MAGA return to this Americana. Like this is, to me, this is just the tug of war between two competing visions they put before us and they triangulate us. Are we going?
So you don't think the technocracy and all that is like a future outcome of, if not the United States, the whole world?
I think it's already here.
With the 15-minute cities,
I think,
and all that.
we are
Because they got stuff that's written down from decades ago that it seems to be their plan.
But I'm saying that the plan that I've uncovered, the plan that we've uncovered here, is actually far more extensive and even more nefarious than this
Really?
technocracy future. Yeah, because what I'm pointing out here is that we can provably demonstrate that the multitudes, the billions, have been put into a Truman Show-like false paradigm of what Baudrillard would call hyper reality. That we are already in what, for all intents and purposes, is a one world religion.
Right.
So we're already so deep in it that these future scenarios, to me, are red herrings to distract us from the fact that we're already there. Like Alex Jones, the New World Order is coming.
Don't you think it could get worse? Like, say, for example, if you consider China and what those people live through with the whole digital ID and everything else, and then places like Vietnam, I guess, recently started that as well. I mean, I'm just kind of going off memory here, but don't you think that it could get a lot worse, and possibly we're being distracted in these other ways? You know what I mean? From like maybe pushing back against the digital ID and things of that nature.
I think, honestly, I think that it's already worse than that. They're already in our heads. I don't think we have any privacy. And I think that we are a manipulated species and we've been given a false worldview. And our false worldview has significant implications for our psychoepistemology. We can no longer tell real and fake from the visuals.
Exactly.
So the fact that we're already in a global deception that nobody can see, to me, is more pressing than what might happen in the future. Because they're always saying, oh, World War III, nukes. They're always forecasting these terrible things. But if 2020 is the worst they can do, which is really just global psyop, nobody really suffers in any way other than, I guess, the disruption, the inconveniences. But what I'm saying is like, I don't think it has any teeth. I think it's all pure mind war. And I think it's only going to get better in terms of standards of living and lifespans and entertainment. Like I have a very optimistic view about it, even though it's a little warped because we're all deceived. So I'm saying is that the worst that can happen is already happened. We've already been conquered. We live in a big lie world order.
Well, I agree there, but I just think, I don't know. It just seems like everybody, so many people are deceived. They don't understand or see what you and I are talking about or see. And I think that's the plan with all the distractions and everything. But
or could it get worse? Okay, I do say this. Like I'm not like all black pill, but I will say this: I feel
like I'm pretty much black pilled. I'm trying not to be, but when I read, are you familiar with Patrick Wood's work with Technocracy? I don't know if it's technocracy.com or something. He just put out a new book, which I just got, and I just started reading it. It's called The Final Betrayal. And he's been covering Technocracy way back into the 70s when it was part of the Trilateral Commission. And it just seems like a lot of these people in our government have been a part of the Trilateral Commission and are like, Elon Musk, his technocrat, his grandfather. I mean, J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and all these guys, they're like technocrats. And it just seems like they're pushing, their one world type of Christianity, kind of weird, and this technocracy. And it just seems like it's slowly rolling. And, in other countries, it's, kind of, happening. And I don't know, it just seems like eventually, unless people wake up and we see it, I don't know what we could do about it at this point now, but.
Well, this is something that we do have to consider, because I've been suggesting that the conditioning we've been getting for alien invasion, a higher intelligence taking over, has been preparing us for AI. So there's going to be a point where the masses are going to submit to a higher intelligence taking over. And it sounds all well and good until you realize that the AI is always going to be curating the worldview the same way media does. In other words, it's not going to tell us about mass manipulation, media fakery, false worldview, and dig into the implications of manipulated history. No, it's going to be a slave to the system, but it's going to be put in charge of us. So I think we're entering into a deeper level of the Truman Show. That's inevitable. I think we're
no, that's what. I believe it. Yeah, I know.
And is there any way out of it?
It seems that way.
Honestly, the only way out of it is you have to become a skeptic of the world stage itself, and until you recognize it as a model, you would never even become that. So, no, I think collectively we're doomed, but we already have been. We already were born into this thing. It's just getting more high tech.
I know. It's kind of scary.
It's incontestable.
You think about how even our iPhones are supposedly tracking our refrigerators and all these smart things that we have. It's just amazing. But it seems like I don't know.
Well, okay. The worst case scenario is we're being hit with this new iteration of bread and circuses, and we're being entertained into submission. That's like the worst case scenario. Well, maybe that's the best case. The worst case is we are somehow being conditioned into being something less than human, and we're submitting to some system where, I don't know. I mean, any number of Black Mirror realities could become true. Like you might be onto something with these black pills.
I just, anyway, I'll hang up. I know I've been kind of blabbing on here, but I just wanted to talk to you because it just seems like I totally can see, everything that you bring out, the similarities between the movies and the shows and got the number systems and all that stuff, 33 and 9/11 and I'm tracking with all there, but it just seems like, I know and I believe that the history has been written in advance, and some of these big events have already been scripted and people have already been groomed, at probably a young age to fill that role. You know what I mean? But sometimes I just kind of wonder, it's all interesting and listening and tracking with you with all the, the movie stuff and everything, but I just kind of been wondering, could this be like another rabbit hole?
No, I'm saying no, it's certainly not. And here's why. It's not just the movies, it's the concurrent drills, but also we have evidence of worldview warfare that is ongoing and successful. This is why we are in this controlled paradigm, because nobody has seen its architecture. We're the only ones pointing it out. And this is provably the only conspiracy, and it's successful. Every other conspiracy theory out there has been debunked, discredited, and proven to be part of the controlled paradigm. So no, this is the only available paradigm shift that can get you mentally off the grid. And we're not just talking about the numbers and similarities. We're talking about propaganda placement that shows that entertainment is a branch of government. And we can name names, we can name directors that are directly involved with the implementation of these psyops that are used to condition people to accept a prefabricated worldview. Like, this is a huge scandal. This is not a distraction. Anything that's based on fear, conjecture, or worst case scenarios is the distraction. I'm not in a place of fear. I'm very optimistic about it.
Yeah. Well, no, I agree with you.
But I'm saying this, though.
You know, like,
We are already in a dark age in the sense that we can't tell real from fake anymore. And obviously it has some black pill kind of vibe to it. But it was already this way. It's just going through a new iteration.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's what it is. But it just seemed like with 9/11, their plan was to get into the Middle East. They wanted, you know, all the public to back them up. You know, the whole crazy Boston bombing thing, you know, again, with the whole Muslim thing. And there was reasons for that. But with this right here, I'm just trying to understand, okay, so where are they going with this, you know? Anyway, I'll let you go. I'm just trying to...
Yeah, I appreciate the call. I appreciate the...
Kind of a sounding board. I'm trying to...
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to figure all this stuff out. You know?
No, these are valid questions, and thank you for calling.
I feel like I'm like an alien or something in this world, because I think so differently now than the normie people. I mean, even the so-called truthers, sometimes they just think I'm crazy. You know, this. You know.
Yeah, I get it. The truthers think that we're tinfoil hatters now because we've gone outside of their boundaries, and we're continuing to press on out in these unexplored areas, the known unknowns, because there is more beyond Trutherville.
Yeah, and there was a time where you know, I kind of evolved with this whole thing. You know, the whole, you know, COVID and just all that madness that went on. And you know, by the way, I bought one of those masks that you have, the orange mask that says 666.
Oh, that's funny. The mask of the beast.
Yeah, right. Anyway, you know, I jumped on the Israel bandwagon, you know, and then, you know, I was the whole Gaza thing, and then I started realizing, well, wait a minute, man, I think could it be possible that they're working together? I mean, I don't, like you said, I don't know what's real anymore. You know, the whole rubber babies and all this propaganda coming from, you know, Gaza and all this, you kind of wonder, okay. And a lot of the truther people that I know they're just right, you know, still there, anti-Israel and all that.
It's the theater of Psywar. And what they have done is they've used emotional appeals and marketing tactics to get people to take sides in the political horseshoe at these various extremes. And if you take one issue, there's clusters of beliefs attached to it, and you get caught up in the mind war. And what I'm trying to do is create an alternative to this marching lockstep with the controlled opposition.
Right.
So, hey, thanks for the call. Great call. Great questions.
Yeah, all right.
And people will probably comment. Yeah, we'll follow up on this. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Take care. Bye.
And Scrapper Bob, you can text the messages to the same number, 505-510-4226. So that's a valid question. Is this a distraction? Looking at movies, like we're looking at the nuance of movies and the programming. Meanwhile, they're bringing in this big agenda, the transhumanist agenda. Like, we're being blindsided. AI is taking over. We're entering into a dystopia. They're cutting off food stamps. Like, it looks very dark. And then here we are. Hey, did you see the new Netflix movie? Yeah, it kind of matched this Crown Jewels thing and the protests and Newsom's meme. So it almost seems like we're looking at very flippant aspects of it when the real doomy stuff is occurring. And after 2020, I let go of the idea that they're even capable of bringing real doom. If they were, they would have doomed us by now. So it's all just theater of mind war. However, that being said, we're looking at a power structure that creates this disparity of a knowledge disparity, a disparity of power, where it used to be you had movable type press has been credited with allowing this power balance to be disrupted. Well, now anybody can make copies, other people can read. So this idea of the elite is being challenged because now the masses can access the same type of content. And the internet had that same kind of feel to it, like decentralizing the power structure. Now bloggers can hold news accountable. So we're like looking at this power structure that's based on keeping the masses in relative darkness. And then we catch up, and then something happens. And I think right now what's happening is what we're looking at now is another consolidation of power. And AI is going to be a mask to do so. And I don't think it's any better or worse than things were before. It's just more consolidated because they're going to introduce a higher power, artificial intelligence, and we're probably going to hand over keys to everything to Hell 9000. However, AI is still going to be a liar. It's going to echo the dominant paradigm as scripted by the PSYOP entertainment complex. But the reason I don't feel like there's incoming doom is that we are already here. We crossed that line a long time ago. The new world order isn't coming. It's already here. It's the old one. The old world order is getting a paint job. They're updating the nomenclature. You know, there's just a few changes being made, but it's the same structure. It's just going digital. As far as like digital ID and being tracked, like those are things that I don't think are even relevant that much anymore. It's like we're Truman in a Truman Show. Everything we're doing is tracked. Netflix purchased your direct messaging from Facebook and your browser history. They know everything about us. I say they, I mean the marketing department that's marketing the history that they're presenting for us on the world stage. And we're not just looking at surface details, because what we're talking about are significant events like January 6th, the significance of Donald Trump faking his head wound. Like these are significant historic events that steer elections, that steer mass opinion. And the fact that these are fake or staged is a better word, should precipitate a paradigm shift in anybody who thinks about it for more than 5 or 6 seconds. You should never vote again. Truman V3000 says government wants people tired of Republicans and Democrats, so they embrace AI governance. I thought about this. I thought that perhaps the reason why Trump is making a very conspicuous display of this lavish lifestyle that they're living, the gold-plated sinks, the carpeted bathrooms with the remodeling of the White House. Meanwhile, 42 million people are going to be denied Thanksgiving turkey because of EBT cuts. Like they're creating a perception here. Marie Antoinette, Trump as Marie Antoinette, no kings. You know, all of this connects to this bigger story of let's make people tired of corruption. And how do you get rid of corruption? Well, you bring in AI. You can't bribe AI. You can't take it to an island and compromise it. So people will say, yeah, let's do it. Swiss says most normies have no concept of doom outside of losing their phones. Yeah. Well, look, I have no fear about the future, no apprehension, not worried about weather weapons, 5G towers, chemtrails, deep states, World War II, or no, World War III, Civil War II, comets that might be aliens, solar flares, nukes hitting Seattle. None of these things increase my heart rate whatsoever. Like nothing triggers me. I'm not worried about troops coming to my house and putting a boot on my face. Like to me, this is the theater of Psywar. And if it's not theater, then where's the real stuff that we're actually worried about? We see manufactured outrage, but it seems like the internet's just become a major steam valve. Like, we're probably not going to get another 2020 city burning riot again, or spate of riots. Antifa's not going to do that again. They don't need to. The No Kings protests were flops. I mean, I saw the local ones. I saw like 15 people. But why do they even need to anymore? I mean, like I said, the internet has become such a steam valve that we don't need street protests to give people the illusion of having a voice. And maybe that's one of the things to consider here. We have no say in this. Your votes don't matter. If we're right about the UPS plane thing, that election in New York was rigged. All elections are rigged. It's all a facade. It's written in advance. We have no say in any of it. Maybe at a local level. What's happening says they can't be that far ahead of us. They would have already done what they're doing now. It's impossible to calculate 1,000 years ahead because no one knows everything. Well, that's assuming that we are at the cutting edge of what is available. I mean, a good example is the movie The Village, where the elders keep the villagers in this little safe spot in a commune in the middle of the woods, and they're living like it's, 18th century. It's kind of idyllic and peaceful, no planes flying overhead. They don't know they're in the 20th century. So they're clearly writing our history in advance. So news becomes history. And these staged events have become history. Look in your history book. Every fake event we have unpacked is going to be given the mainstream reportage in history books. Our history is being written in advance. The question is, how far in advance? Well, on some of these bigger events, indications are 30 years. And if things are being written 30 years in advance, including Butler, Pennsylvania, it means it was preordained Trump was going to be president. That he was going to lose in 2020, and that in 2024, he was going to get the ear piercing. So what we're suggesting here is that the power elite have successfully achieved a singular worldview by totally hijacking history and curating our collective worldview. So the meaning of it is that in addition to what you experience with your senses and your daily life and your real life, they augment it with a bunch of stuff. Much of it is designed to influence your opinions and your choices and your culture, your ideology. So they are controlling people down to the level of the individual by getting people to go into boxes. But it's propaganda warfare. And are things going to get worse? Well, maybe only in your head. Because to me, it looks like things are getting better. And I know that goes against the grain. Because if you're an awake truther, you're in a constant state of duress. Like you're scared of condensation trails. They made you scared of ice, of what are really just beautiful cirrus clouds. How many people were waiting for, World War III or Civil War? You got preppers, you got people digging bunkers. If somebody digs a bunker and they go out in the middle of nowhere and now they can survive for 6 months underground, they're not off the grid if the things that they're hiding for are just manufactured threats, things that can't even happen, implausible, psyops. Imagine being psyoped into becoming your own FEMA camp prison warden. Lean Dion says, the propaganda has made political people especially more violently divided and reactive. Yeah, it reveals a lot. Like, leftists are cool with political violence and murder. Like, it's culturally acceptable if you're on the left to root for political murder or politically motivated murder, where Luigi Mangione is a hero. But then on the far right, someone like Daniel Penny's a hero for strangling a homeless guy who was unarmed on a subway. So it's on both sides. You have this loss of empathy. It's actually kind of mutual. But I think that's part of the program here. The reason why you have this perfect dialectic, like the billionaires on the left, like Bill Gates in particular, we'll say Bill Gates, for example, billionaire on the left, he's a savior to the left, but to the right, he's a villain. Elon Musk, he's a savior to the right. He saved free speech. He's taking us to Mars, but he's a villain to the left. And the reason why they create these extremes is to maintain the dialectic. They need to maintain this duopoly. Mainstream and alt mainstream, closed ecosystem, echo chamber, closed system. They have it on lockdown. But the reason for the constant agitation is to maintain the split, to keep people taking sides. That's why Tucker's out there pushing chemtrails. They got to keep chemtrails on the far right as antagonism to climate change on the left. One blames government, the other blames the private sector. It's a great system. I don't see it breaking down. I don't see anybody stepping outside of it. Look at how the majority of truthers are marching lockstep behind Candace Owens. They made her #1. She's the most obvious propagandist that I've seen. A script reading propagandist with no original ideas. She's an actress. She knows Charlie Kirk isn't dead, but she has people eating breadcrumbs out of the palm of her hands all day long. So the reason I'm not doomy about it is that clearly the PSYOP entertainment complex has already won. They've already got this on lockdown. Like, we're latecomers to this. It's not something you can stop, not at a collective level. At an individual level, yes, you can opt out, but there was never a platform to opt out before. What we're doing in particular, which has never been done, is one, we've correctly diagnosed what we're seeing. This fabricated history in the making, the implications of the long-term faking of news and what that does for the worldview, hyper reality, reality augmentation, a gullible, credulous, captive audience with mind aids who cannot filter out the mind viruses. Their minds are trash can receptacles for agitprop 24/7. Like, we've diagnosed this effectively. But what we have that no one else has yet is a platform that doesn't take for granted that what is on the screen is somehow objective, and then we can bounce off that. So our perspective, the off-world stage perspective, is one that is inclusive of long and short-term media fakery, news bending, history bending, and the agenda behind it, the ultimate purpose, which again, worldview warfare. Successful worldview warfare, but we're creating a separate platform for it because the people who noticed things in the past had nowhere to go. You cannot line up behind Stu Peters and InfoWars and Russell Brand and think you're going to get even close to the truth of how these things operate, because media is not what we've been told. Reporters aren't objective and going out there and recording a scene, interviewing people, and then telling you what's going on. Here are the facts. No, I mean, locally, sure. Mundane stories, sure. But with the staged events, the media is part of it. They're the production company. They're the crew. They're the cameramen. They're the cinematographers. And if you can look at the record of fake news that we've covered just in the last 5 years, you can see the pattern here. The fake news happens, the simulated event happens, the mainstream and the alt debate about it in a very template way. It never goes outside of these bounds, and then it goes into the history books, goes into Wikipedia as the mainstream reports on it. So if you follow back 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, you can start to see the bending of history, the long-term effects, the worldview that it put us in, and how it diverges from what we cannot verify, from what we have to subtract from it. So when I look at people who are stuck in the mud flooders, I'm like, you guys are looking at the right question, but your starting point is off. Let's not try to invalidate history from 300 years ago and ignore the fake history from yesterday that influences us right now. that has names attached to it. I mean, we're talking about actors, musicians, writers, and directors whose work is deliberately inserted into the media ecosystem to soften us up in preparation for psychological operations. In other words, we're seeing that a lot of our favorite directors are actually propagandists. And I think that's a scandal. I think it should be anyway. But the fact is, we can actually provide names and correlations. We have answers, and what we're showing here is the hidden infrastructure of media. And again, it's not just the movies or the entertainment, and these aren't just coincidences. It's propaganda placement, and it's targeted, and it influences people. Why do you think people are so predictable? Why do you think they're NPCs? Well, they're NPCs because they're going with the program. They're going with the program because they've been hit with nonstop propaganda reinforcing these illusions. But we can rule out that these are just connections that we're making because these same events are coordinated with drills. Department of Homeland Security, police, hospitals, all the various organizations and institutions that would be part of a bigger psyop are present at every one of these things. Adamski says, I have an old friend whose husband is a retired policeman. How do I approach the conversation? Ask him about, well, I don't know if I would. But I think that anybody in law enforcement should know something about psyops. I don't think they're completely out of the loop. But as far as how do they recruit for these things, that's an interesting question. Because everyone, like I actually asked AI, I said, hypothetically, if the Charlie Kirk thing were faked, who would have to know about it? Because that's a valid question. If he was squibbed and not shot, well, then we can rule in unequivocally a number of people who would have to be in the know. You can rule out plausible deniability for the people who moved his body into the van, for example. And if you look at that circle and you expand it and you connect a couple of dots, as in these people have no plausible deniability, it unravels more than just this one person staged death. It necessarily involves police. It involves the entire media, left and right. It would certainly involve the vice president and the president and Erica Kirk and TPUSA's management. So TPUSA then is complicit in this. TPUSA is fake. Like, this isn't a legitimate organization representing people's interests that's going to help them get into power, because everything they're doing is going along with or is subservient to the script. The script is what dominates. The fake dominates real. The scripted version of things is how things are going to go. Adamski says, certainly there's compartmentalization within the police force. Exactly. Compartmentalization is a key concept here. So you've got the majority of people are programmed. They're going with the program. They don't recognize it as such. They're misinformed. And again, this is provable. Decades of fake news forming your framework for how you interpret everything else. Yeah, you're already in this paradigm. So we already have this program population, but the programmers, we'll say the directors who contribute to the psyops, the people who are part of the psyops, you would call them the programmers. But they're only going to be let in their specific department. They don't, like, for example, if you're part of a group of paramedics who did a mass casualty simulation where they, or you participated in a fake shooting. Yeah, sure, you know that, okay, we can do psyops. We are actually influencing the public against guns, or whatever your rationale is for doing it. But you wouldn't necessarily know about Butler being fake. You wouldn't necessarily know about fake terror attacks. So there's just no reason to think that any of the programmers are totally in the know. It's got to be compartmentalized to be capable of, I guess, scrutiny, or facing scrutiny and not being exposed. Like no one person knows too much. It's like what you'd call security clearances. We live underneath a security clearance society. But our position, and the reason I say deprogrammed, is that we recognize the program for what it is. And the program is the curated worldview, a product of the selective focus of mass media and all of its augmentations, and its utter belief in what came before, its reinforcement of what came before. Donna Southhart says, what about blackmailed people as actors? Yeah, there's a couple of ways to get at people. One of them is, blackmail, and the other one is compensation. I think it's interesting how many Hollywood actors seem to also be involved in reinforcing psyops in various ways. But I'm very much open to the idea here that 30 years is a safe bet with the big psychological operations. But with 9/11, I would even stretch it back a little further. But again, what is the point of it? Well, the point of it is, in order for you to accept these things as real, they want us to react to it in predictable ways, make us believe things are possible. It's like the Overton window. We got to open the Overton window to make something implausible or unlikely seem possible and even inevitable. And it's undeniable that entertainment is a huge influence, that we are being influenced Edward Bernays-like en masse. I mean, look at how rapid society has changed. Look how it's consistently changing. Our behaviors, our values. You think that's all an accident? We're living in a brave new world. There are so many challenges to traditional worldviews. And so these changes are not happening organically. They're being driven by our media consumption. And again, I like to point out to you that I'm a realist. I'm not a reality denialist. And so we're looking at another fact here is that what the media focuses on is about conforming you to a predetermined model. It's not about informing you. And I think was it in 2018 or 2019? The school shootings that weren't. NPR was doing a survey on something like 235 mass shootings, because it was like the worst year, the mass shootings that weren't. So they started calling schools and trying to figure out, well, how bad are these things? And what they found, it's called the school shootings that weren't. This is from 2018. So in the 2015-2016 school year, there were several hundred reported shootings that they investigated. And it turns out that these were not real. So these weren't even psyops that they did on TV with actors or that we actually saw headlines for. These were just under the radar reports. Oh, we had an incident here, incident here. So then the mass media would go around reporting, oh, 2015, 2016, we had a school shooting every day of the year. So they look into it and they find out that, no, these were mostly miscategorized or just simply didn't happen. And out of the hundreds of them, they were only able to verify 11 incidents. And these weren't even shooting incidents. These were like somebody brought a gun to school or something along those lines. But it hadn't been checked. These numbers just got passed on and it just got shared. And I was like, wow, the media actually did some journalism and they had to autocorrect. So the NPR accidentally exposed this. But these statistics influence opinions. You know, these headlines like, oh, look, we've had a school shooting every day. It's an epidemic of mass shootings. This actually gets into people's heads and it influences their opinions. But what that whole incident kind of revealed was this massive blind spot where if you passively accept all the reportage without fact testing it or reality testing it, you're going to be put into a bubble. Let's Go says, I love how Tim is allergic to dooming and glooming, no pessimism. The ivory tower perspective is freeing. Yeah, it actually is. And the original concept of skepticism was based upon suspending judgment, because apparently rushing to judgment gets you to overreact quite a bit. But that what evolved from this was the recognition that skepticism led to a peace of mind, a quiescence, something you would not attain if you were non-skeptical, if you were reactive. And I'm not reactive. So I'm not doomy, I'm not gloomy, I'm not going to overreact. And even if things get really bad, I'm going to be the one at the level head. The truthers are going to be running for their guns. Alex Jones is going to be hunting his neighbors for their meat. They're the first ones to lose their crap, running to their bunkers, panicking about potential blackouts. And if they can get you to panic or live in a state of constant stress and fear, then you're conquered, in my view. The fact that we don't care or we're detached means the mind war isn't working on us. It's like Mystery Science Theater 3000. We're throwing popcorn at the screen when we're a captive audience being forced to watch bad science fiction intended to drive us crazy. That's what the show's about. Mystery Science Theater 3000. The bad science fiction is supposed to make them lose their minds, but they retain their sanity by laughing at it, by scoffing. I mean, the only doomy side about it is the observation here that we've already been conquered. This mind war is the norm. It's already succeeded. We're far beyond the 1984, but we've been given a different version of it. Like, instead of cameras everywhere spying on us, we self-surveil. They kind of gave it to us in the culture. They've changed the culture to where we are no longer valuing privacy anyway. But I have no expectation that things are going to get bad. All the doomsayers have been proven wrong again and again. You know, if somebody is pushing doom and gloom, ask them what their opinions were in 2020. Like, did you think everybody was going to die? Did you wait for Vaxageddon? Because you'll find that it's always the same people who are doing the whole Chicken Little routine. Do you know how that story ends? Like an acorn falls on Chicken Little's head, and then she runs around telling everybody the sky is falling. The end of the story is the fox says, you can hide in my cave, and all the animals run into the cave, and then he blocks the entrance. And that's kind of what I see. If they can get you to be reactive and you run around like Chicken Little, then the fox will get you into their paradigm, into their cave. Let's Go says, you were born into it. No need to attempt to change things. Just evolve with the flow. We need to figure out what it is from a more analytical and philosophical approach first, before we get into our heads that there should be activism or something. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, Tim, it's Leo Pirate.
Hey, what's up, Leo Pirate?
So I was listening to a little bit. I tuned in again late before I realized, you're probably going to end the show soon, so let me call in. I just wanted to get a word in about like kind of the approach for kind of making the world, lighting the world stage on fire. And I think a big thing is attacking the idea or the concept of fake news and how Donald Trump, co-opted that term, where people think it means media bias. Because that's something a lot of people have trouble getting hurt. Like, that's a hurdle they can't get over. Because I say you uncritically take the screen as objective, and they say, no, I don't. I question the media. And I'm like, no, I'm not talking about questioning the political slant or the spin. I mean, some of these events have crisis actors and directors, green screen, special effects, squids. If we could get that idea out, do you think that would help?
I've given up on the people who haven't already figured it out. I think at this point, the only people that are reachable are those who have self-deprogrammed 80% of the way. Like, if they're at the point where they're already, I guess, arriving at the idea that Charlie Kirk is not dead, if they can arrive there on their own, if they've moved past Candace Owens and her rabbit trails, then we can reach them. But anybody who's still on the world stage, who are still part of it and going with the program, I don't think you can help them, because their perspective will actually limit their ability to process what you're saying. I don't think it makes any sense at this point to reach out. I think we need to focus on the early adopters of the off-world stage perspective. Only the early adopters. If we have to drag somebody there, we don't want them. We want the people who've already figured it out, so that we can draw a greater distinction between those who are lingering behind, clinging to guardrails, drinking the Kool-Aid in Alex Jonestown. I say, let them dig themselves in deeper while we separate and build this separate entity.
Okay. No, I've heard you mention that, like, you're not interested in kind of like reaching people who haven't already come to a certain level of critical analysis of media on their own. And I agree with that. Those are the only people I talk to. I certainly don't talk about this kind of stuff, like, openly. It's just, I just had a rather disappointing conversation with, a friend of mine who also had previously told me that he began to question the moon landing. And it was around the time of Fly Me to the Moon and, like, the kind of mainstream perspective where people started like, yeah, the moon landing might be fake. And when I told him, I was, like, suggesting that perhaps, the Charlie Kirk thing was like a bad horror movie with like a squid. He just couldn't, you know what I mean? He couldn't comprehend that. He was like, what do you mean?
Yeah, they can't.
There was so many.
They got Westworld syndrome. If it's not part of their simulation, they'll say, that doesn't look like anything to me. And some of them are belligerent, and they have they're Plato cave dwellers, where they actually resent you trying to, quote, wake them up. But my point of it here isn't just to leave them in the dark, but to only reach those who are already early adopters, striving, who can grasp the off-world stage perspective. Once we've established this as a separate, self-aware demographic, then you'll see that a lot of these people who would be slow to adopt it, then they'll look. A lot of people just won't even look this way until they see numbers, and that's just because a lot of people are really, I guess, attached to the idea of being part of a consensus.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense, and it feels a lot more comforting if you have like a community or a group, and you've kind of established that with the think tank for sure. And I'm sorry I haven't actually really like contributed enough to, because I do actually want to get an art piece from you someday in a book. Just because I can be like, I was one of the OG kind of people, when that isn't the case at all. You've been around way longer since I joined the think tank. But I would say the perspective provided here isn't just, pointing out the mechanics of fakery. It's also like the symbolic analysis of the world stage that I find most fascinating, because I guess people kind of get hung up on the idea of an event being fake, not considering the next step of the implications of it being fake.
Exactly. Like it's not like saying something's fake is an insight anymore. It's not enough to say it's fake, trust me. We have to be a lot deeper about it. Like, if fake, who's involved, how extensive, how far back was it planned? And what we're getting when we're doing this is we're getting a bigger or a clearer picture of the architecture of media itself. And one of the things that we have demonstrated consistently is that entertainment has always been entrained with the fake news events, the simulated events. And that's an important point, because we're talking about how entertainment has been co-opted for the purposes of influencing our worldviews, which is bigger than just your vote. So that's, to me, that's our main focal point here. Is that's been occulted by all these little smaller conspiracies.
It's almost as if people in the MSM box, they can understand what we're talking about, but with a very superficial level, in the sense that if you say entertainment has been co-opted for propaganda, they'll be like, well, yeah, to push feminism, or to, you know, right, to push a political agenda. When you say, no, they're actually prefiguring staged news events, as well as those political messages to agitate people like, you know, the person I'm talking to, hypothetically, right there. But it's like, they're actually using it to reinforce the simulated reality that we all take for granted, that so many of these news events, or at least the biggest ones, are completely staged. And I keep repeating it. It's like showing concurrent programming and predictive programming, pointing to a world stage event means the event is staged. That is like such a big thing. I was in the dark about that for so long. I remember years ago when Richie from Boston, he had pointed out the white noise connection, how Netflix had that white noise film, which had a East Palestine, Ohio train derailment, and then right afterward, there was, you know, a real train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. But he didn't have the level of analysis that's here at the think tank. Instead, he was like, don't you think that's weird? Look at this. Netflix is showing us stuff they're going to do, right? He didn't explain the symbolic. He didn't explain the symbolic aspect of that. That means it is fake. And it had the same, extras? Had the same extras. And also the name East Palestine was correlated with the conflict in the Middle East. Like, that level of analysis wasn't there. Instead, it was like, don't you think this is weird? Look at this, right?
Yeah, and at this point, we can also say this. The occurrence of Netflix or otherwise mainstream entertainment mirroring a suspected fake event is yet another indicator that it is fake, because real life does not imitate Netflix. Fake events simulate Netflix or imitate Netflix.
Exactly. And I think that's what people need to understand. It's like, we're not saying that these are like with the spellcasters or wizards. It means that the news event is pulling inspiration from the art, from the Netflix. But if we have the history bending or news bending perspective, technically both of them, from way in advance, are pulling from the meta script.
Exactly.
Like way even back further. It goes even further back, right? But because it's so occulted, the concept of the meta script, it just seems so convoluted and out there, right? So it is amazing how compartmentalized the world stage system is, that it is like, you know, essentially magic. It's a magic trick that's being done through disparate channels to deliver these little bits of pre-programming to then prepare our minds for a world stage event that even when you try to point it out, you look crazy, like the way a narcissist, when they always do the most subtle passive-aggressive kind of attacks on their target with pointed things only they would know. And if the target tries to say, look at how they sent me this text message with this picture, it's like people are like, what are you talking about? Like, whoa, chill. And so that's how it can be if we don't have a very calm and, you know, nuanced perspective showing the overall connection of the world stage.
Well, what I plan to do here, what I'm working on here is explaining the model here. And this is why people don't get it. They don't have a framework to make sense of it. So there's just some key points that have to be conveyed. One of them being simulated events happen because media is a liar. These events are not only unchallenged, but they accumulate. Fake news or news in general becomes history. So if you look at the cumulative effect of psyops in our fake news, these effects aren't merely just the 24-hour news cycle in which they take place, but that these are taking place, or these are occurring on a timeline, and they're all interconnected. And we're looking at the long-term history bending. But I think for people to get it, they have to recognize, or at least look at this thing as a construct. Like history is a construct and it's being proactively created. But I think it's going to require some good visuals, some good infographics to explain how this works so that we don't, quote, sound crazy. Because the fact of it is, the mainstream perspective is crazy. It is, in fact, superstitious. It's in a state of hyper reality. The consumers of media, mainstream consumers, can't tell real from fake. They don't know psyops happen, so they're credulous and gullible and naive, and they're misinformed. So I don't care if credulous, gullible, misinformed brainwashees call me crazy when I'm describing the nature of the psyop entertainment complex. They just don't have the terminology yet. That's why I'm not reaching to them. I want to reach those who've already figured out enough so we can say, hey, here's the terminology to explain what we're seeing. This is the difference between active and passive media consumption. This is their duopoly. This is our perspective that adds in the following. And I think when it's explained properly, our alternative to the alternative media will swell in numbers because a lot of people, in fact, are capable of getting it. And we can leave the programmed, the NPC like blue pillars, we can leave them where they are. We can leave the red pillars where they are if they choose to, cling to the alternative shadows on the wall. But I think the facts are on our side, and this is only going to continue to grow and to expand.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, I totally don't mind. It doesn't hurt my feelings. When I find the closer a friend or a relationship I have with someone, they know that calling someone crazy, so it doesn't apply to me. So I'm like, I don't mind if someone says that. It's like, okay, they're not ready. But curiously, when I think about that previous conversation, had I said that, like, oh, Erica Kirk was like planning, she was involved, that he probably would have been like, oh, tell me more.
Yeah.
Right? He would have been more, if they feed into the conspiracy narratives that are a part of the episode, then they'd be like, oh, that's an interesting take. But just saying that it's staged top to bottom, that destroys both the existing conspiracies and the officially reported story. And it's like, well, what? And I do think it's interesting how I think people would be more willing to believe in the world stage if it had their political biases baked into it. So if you're like, oh yeah, the world stage directors are actually a bunch of liberal Democrats who want to push this and so forth, they're a bunch of conservative white men, right? Then people would, depending on who you're talking to, they'd be like, oh, well, tell me more.
Well, right. Like, for example, the J-pill people are happy to consider that Hollywood and media are controlled. In fact, there were some articles that were saying that there was too much influence of Israel in the movie Top Gun Maverick and that it was just promoting the bombing of Iran. So if you remember, when Iran was being bombed through the ventilation vents, everybody said, oh, we just lived through Top Gun Maverick. And then someone looked at the producers of Maverick and they were suggesting that this was the influence of Hollywood serving the military industrial complex. So they noticed the connection between, so here's another reason for predictive programming, gaining public support for things like what we saw with these bombings in Iran, using a Top Gun, Tom Cruise action movie. But their conclusion was wrong. But they were right in noticing the correlation. But their conclusion was Israel has too much influence over media. Well, they're looking too small because this is not an anomaly. That's another thing too. These aren't anomalies. The major world events with major Hollywood productions reinforcing them, this is standard operating procedure. The fakery is systemic.
Yeah, and the shibboleth of the Israel runs our government and Hollywood. I think that these lies serve a functional purpose, kind of like with Mirage Men. It was like the creation of the alien narrative served a functional purpose to occult or obscure Air Force research. And people who are looking into that, they could keep tabs on people like that. And with the idea of Israel, this is why I had such a curiosity with Mormonism, because it's the oldest form of Christian Zionism I can find, really.
Oh, interesting.
Since the 1800s. It really is, yeah, really, because what it was is, and also the Jehovah's Witnesses as well, with Charles Taze Russell. He was like late 1800s. Both the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses, it was like the late 1800s. They had this sudden fixation on did not exist yet, mind you, still owned by Britain. Palestine was still owned by Britain, but it's like what's amazing is when studying the history of Christianity in America, no one like the Americas, the Christians who fled to the New England area of America, they didn't have any weird, peculiar fixation on the Jewish people. But this question on the Holy Land is an ancient, I would say, distraction that has been built into all forms of, Catholicism as well, right? The Crusades, right? The Crusades going all the way back then. It's just like, why are people so obsessed with this little strip of land? And it's very interesting to see how, with the Balfour Declaration later, we have a religion, an all-American form of Christianity called Mormonism that predates the Balfour Declaration by something like 70 years, and is basically saying in their stated prophecy, their articles of faith, that they need to reestablish Jerusalem in the Middle East and establish the New Jerusalem in the United States, with the 10 lost tribes of Israel being in America and the Jews being in Jerusalem. And in Doctrine and Covenants 77, I forgot the exact number, they already talk about the establishment of the political state of Israel and Jerusalem being rebuilt. And that was written in 1832. So Mormons themselves use that as a prophecy. They say, you see, look.
Okay,
look
that's fascinating. So you're that's what I'm looking at here. So we're talking about the power they have by influencing news the way they do, and therefore history. It's quite literally the power to direct history, to control time. And how long has this power been exercised? How centralized has it been this entire time? Like, these are valid questions, but it's not new. And when I look at the concepts of even like the New Age, if you look at the idea of, I guess, like the precession of the equinoxes, you can look at this idea that maybe these things are planned in broad strokes over centuries, and then over decades, they fine tune it, but that we may be looking at long-term engineering of history, and this process may have begun a long time ago, and we might be living through a continuation of it and a consolidation of it.
Right, how they write out, like, we talk about history bending, tens or decades or years in advance. Who if it was like aeons, hundreds, or even 1,000 years in advance, which is, depending how far we want to take it. And it's totally possible, right, what they do with aeons, right? And, I mean, the reason why I study these forms of American, different forms of American Christianity is not to, say, oh, look at how wrong they are. Similar to how while you study the media, you don't go, look how fake these news stories are. You're looking for the functional purpose of it. And in the same way, how when you parse a lot of the popular media and talking heads and stuff, you can almost divine what will be the next twist or plot event on the world stage. I've been studying the eschatologies of American Christians, and that's what I find so fascinating, that all of them converge on the political state of Israel. And aside from it being, completely biblically incorrect, I'm interested how the Jehovah's Witnesses, they believe that only 144,000 people are going to heaven before the second coming of Christ. Well, that fits in with the evangelical view of a pre-tribulation rapture that, left behind. Have you heard that idea of, like, people with their clothes left? And
yeah.
Like, oh, what is this? Yeah, that's not biblical, but it's a very common idea. And what I was thinking is that could very well be faked with our media, right? One day on social media. Right?
Oh yeah, it could be faked, and that has a parallel in the science fiction version with the whole aliens and the tractor beam. The symbol of the Space Needle actually represents this. The idea of a science fiction rapture.
So it could be false. Right, so they could, the same phenomenon, there'd be like a bunch of mobile videos of people recording in their neighborhood or in the city or whatever, look at all these quotes here, what happened to these people? And the Jehovah's Witnesses, evangelicals will say it's the rapture, and then science-based people will say it's an alien invade, or like they were abducted by aliens. So it provides multiple facets for a faked event.
Oh yeah, and the conspiracy theorists, like the Tucker Carlson type listeners, will say that no, these are demons, or it was a nefarious government project and these people are having their adrenochrome sucked. So like they can definitely pull it off. And then there's going to be different interpretations depending on where you are in the political horseshoe. This big harvest of our adrenochrome, our souls. Yeah, I think the rapture has a counterpart with science fiction. Like I've been saying that aliens are a construct for the atheists to accept angels and angel-like scenarios. You know, these are analogies, but these are created for the progressive paradigm to correspond to what the more traditional views have.
Yeah, and that's like real, syncretism with the religion of scientism and the false forms of Christianity. That's like, that's like a perfect merging of scientism and false Christianity. And Mormonism has it front and center with this Nasatology. I think I've already talked about how they're viewed the celestial kingdoms and how Earth, every single planet has their own Jesus in Mormonism, and that when you ascend to godhood, you become your own father and have your own planet with spirit babies and have your own Jesus and have a story of redemption for each. Very fractal, but very, Gnostic in a way. But the curious thing about the obsession with Israel is I think that Mormonism is plain as bread. They're so boring, right? They're very middle of the road. Sure, they're more conservative, but I noticed that their pro-Israel sentiment is not as obnoxious as people like Ben Shapiro or the others. Even Glenn Beck, which, by the way, I mentioned Glenn Beck is a Mormon. So the Blaze and everyone underneath him are this kind of middle of the road pro-Israel. They're not extreme like the Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, Sam Hyde types. They're not vehemently anti-Israel. They're kind of just middle of the road. And what I could imagine is when there is some kind of domestic, a faked domestic terrorist right-wing event, it will be in the minds of the world stage audience, being against Israel means you're a domestic terrorist, which I know saying out loud sounds absurd because Israel's all the way in the Middle East.
No,
really
it tracks. It tracks because what they've done is the woke right, that is the anti-Israel side, not the neocon right. The woke right has been aligned as this equivalent to radical Islam. So like the domestic violent extremism on the far right is very much a parallel. It's like the incel is like the suicide bomber. Their perspectives, their views on feminism, on Hollywood, on Israel, it all tracks with what has been attributed to radical Islamic views on the West, on Hollywood, on these values, Western women, etc., where it's a pretty one-for-one comparison. And I've compared the QAnon also ties into it as well, because the deep state is just a euphemistic way of saying Israel. So when you look at it, yeah, they have set the stage. Okay, so the white nationalist paramilitary group that's around training right now is called the Base. And you know what Al Qaeda means? Al Qaeda means the base.
The base, yeah. That when you pointed that out, that's when it was like, okay, I've been definitely searching up the right track with that, because that is amazing. The parallel, it's almost like they're creating a domestic version of Islamic extremism in the minds of people. And
the MAGA ban, or vanilla ISIS, white Al Qaeda, it's all there.
And it's strange that with Mormonism, with its, it's not very obvious. You have to read their text and their prophecies. You won't see, Mormons like themselves, being as vehemently pro-Israel. But I have talked with LDS members. And by the way, for everyone who's listening, LDS means Latter-day Saints, which means Mormons. I should stop saying Mormon because they don't call themselves Mormon. That's a key thing. The past living prophet, President Nelson, he made a deliberate move for the entire church hierarchy to stop using the term Mormon, to call themselves Latter-day Saints.
What does the word Mormon come from? Is it a reference to the angel Moroni?
So Moroni is the son of a man whose name is Mormon, and his name comes from the River Mormon, which is where they first baptized people in Zarahemla, which is North America. Zarahemla is like the North American continent where they came, and it was where they first did baptisms at the River Mormon, but also the name of a character. And what's interesting about Mormon, he was a commanding general. He ripped off a piece of his battle garment and made a flag, and he called it Liberty, and offered up a prayer to bless this land. Like America, to the LDS Church, is a holy land. North America is a holy, God-chosen land. And what I was going to get with Mormons, how they, or LDS, how they are subtly pro-Israel in their way. They're also extremely American, very patriotic. They are the most, if you've ever seen the Mormon Tabernacle Choir singing America the Beautiful, it makes even my heart swell. I'm like, whoa.
Okay, Glenn Beck.
American
Glenn Beck said that our founding documents were holy scriptures touched by the finger of God. And then you mentioned America the Beautiful in the Mormon Choir. In Francis Ford Coppola's movie, Megalopolis, there's that scene during Saturnalia where Elvis is wrapped in an American flag singing America the Beautiful. It's hilarious when you look at the implications of it. But
and better, I can one up that. Both Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, for the first term, had the Mormon Tabernacle Choir perform at their inauguration.
Very interesting. And I'm glad you bring this up because when we talk about, like, let's say Mormons, you're talking about a worldview. So you have the real world that we're in, and then all the other stuff they add on top of it. Their myths, their worldview, their agenda, their cosmology. All these things are contained in worldview, and many of them are demonstrably fictional. So it's like a fictional universe, like Marvel Comics. It's the real world plus superheroes. So if you look at it in that concept, you can see how the mainstream media presents us with a fictional universe.
And when you construct this fictional universe on top of reality, you get to control the parameters of that fictional universe. And this is why I think the point of studying the Book of Mormon, most people think it's very boring. So I was absolutely enthralled by it because I was like, whoa, I was like putting, Bible verses and footnotes in the, on the margin. I was so into it because I'm like, what is the point of this? I reject the secular, atheistic, South Park explanation that, Joseph Smith was just some con man. He just wanted to, sleep with younger women and stuff. That's the other thing. I think there's also a functional purpose to polygamy as well. Even though it was outlawed by the fourth LDS president because of the federal law, it had a purpose in its creation in that it allows for rapid reproduction. By the time Brigham Young had come to, what we call now modern-day Utah, at the time they called it Deseret, they had formed essentially their own nation outside of the borders of the United States. And I have talked to LDS members about this. The official LDS church does not practice polygamy. But I asked them, I said, if the LDS president, living prophet, if there was some kind of calamity, I don't know, like a nuke on our screens, where millions of Americans have been wiped out, and the LDS president said, yeah, we need to actually, I just got a message from God, we need to reinstate polygamy, would you do it? And they said yes, without a hitch.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that is true. That is definitely a strategy, the polygamy thing. I don't think it ever stopped behind the scenes. I wouldn't be shocked if the elders are given some kind of loopholes and behind the scenes with their secret Masonic handshakes and rituals. I don't think it's changed. Why would they deviate from what God commanded them? So I kind of find it to be questionable that it ever stopped.
And there are offshoots, and there are stories of people in the official LDS church who kind of, they take the LDS scriptures too seriously, and they kind of go off and veer into that area. But I could basically see it being very tempting for people who want to save the white race to very easily fall into that, abominable stupidity. But the point of it is there's an exoteric and an esoteric interpretation of their Article of Faith number 10, where it says we believe in the gathering of the lost tribes of Israel in America to establish New Jerusalem. The exoteric, if you talk to any missionary, they'll say, that means we need to convert all the Christian denominations, Pentecostals, Protestants, Catholics, and all the Christians in America, we need to convert them. They're the lost tribes. That's the exoteric. The exoteric element is British Israelism, or this idea that the 10 northern tribes, when they were scattered by the Assyrians, actually their remnants are in the Anglo-Saxon and Scottish race. Joseph Smith was of that descent. So that's why they're so white and delightsome. That term comes from the Book of Mormon, white and delightsome. And it's scary. If you ever look at an LDS member, like when one of my coworkers, you just look at them. They're like if you could just imagine in your mind, what does an American look like? You could cut out a picture of an LDS member or a Mormon, and they're like, this is an American. They're like a snapshot of the 1950s. Very interesting that their numbers are increasing.
Yeah, I can see that. You brought up how at the end of the world, it would be very useful to have this infrastructure to rebuild. And it reminds me of how Scientology has a base here in New Mexico where they have all of their writings etched in titanium in these massive plates underground. And their idea is that if the world ends, they will come out and, quote, clear the world. Like, because obviously the reason why the world would fall apart is because we didn't adopt Scientology. So if there's some calamity, they're also something of a post-apocalypse cult. Like, they're ready to rebuild. And they were there at 9/11. Scientologists in yellow vests were there doing stress tests on firemen. So they were part of it. But anyway, my point is, this doomsday thinking is sort of like an ark, having bunkers. It's kind of built into a lot of these religious paradigms. This idea that things could end, we're going to rebuild, the world's going to fall. And it's very culty, very, very culty.
And like you said, it's great clickbait to keep them on the hook. But I'm of the view, which I know you probably don't agree with, I think the world stage will actually face some kind of calamity, and each of these subgroups will have their own response to it. Like, they will have their own, if you will, action plan, because I believe it's from the same camp. Religion is no different than, Netflix or from the news. And I think some of these more occult Christian offshoots, like the Jehovah's Witnesses and the LDS Church, they have an end time scenario. For the Jehovah's Witnesses, they call it Armageddon. And again, it has to do with World War III in the Middle East. LDS Church as well. They think that Jesus will appear in the Mormon temples, because there's a difference between a church and a Mormon temple. The temples are like those big Walt Disney-looking castles they have, and their churches are regular buildings anyone can go to. I went to a Mormon church. The temples are where they have the marriage ceremony. Only people who have temple recommends. It's where you get your temple garments or the Mormon underwear. It's a very special place.
The underwear with the Masonic, square and compass on it?
Yes, for the male and female. So that very Masonic, absolutely. And I'm sure you're already aware that the rites that occur in there are paralleled with a lot of the early Mormon rites. And Joseph Smith even tried to create a Mormon rite, so the Scottish rite, and also if you want to make a Mormon rite.
Oh, interesting.
The thing is, their eschatology, they think that Jesus will appear in the LDS temples across America, where he's going to kind of manifest himself there. And then, during World War III, when the Jews are surrounded by the Gentile armies, and there's another siege happening in Jerusalem, Mormon Jesus will come and save them all. And I think it's something that, if we've already seen the fakery that's been happening with the Israel-Palestine conflict, they can very easily fake something like that on our screen.
Okay, this is powerful stuff as far as influencing people's values and shaping their expectations, because look what the QAnon thing did with the storm and Q, where you had a large segment of the right wing believing that there was a secret war between good and evil, maybe aliens involved, evil groups trafficking children in tunnels underground, and that there was going to be a great awakening where the deep state would be revealed, the bad guys would be executed on TV, and JFK Jr. would be king of the world. And these people believe this stuff. It became like these doomsdays are very attractive. And for some reason, they're very compelling. But if you can look at just in a small group, not small, I mean, this is millions of people, but look at how these people got caught up in this religious fervor over a doomsday scenario that had been concocted for them. These things are very powerful. So I can only imagine how an end time scenario baked into a major religion like Mormonism would be a major part of their worldview and their fixation.
Right, and that's why it's like with QAnon, that was more manufactured as a result of Trump's presidency, and it was a great way to pacify the people, because it's like, oh, there's white hats and black hats in the government, so then you could just refill your popcorn. You don't need to do anything, because patriots are in control, which is such a hilarious.
But they wanted it to end, like they were invested in it. Like, we want the storm, we want the Great Awakening, and I'm like, wait a minute, you guys want it to be true, that the Democrats are trafficking children, draining their blood in rituals, and you want them to be decapitated on TV. It's like they really wanted this stuff to be true. Like, yes, we do.
Well, because it gives such self-righteous, what's it called, justification to all the nonsense that they've been doing all this time. And I agree that they always move the goalposts. I just think it might actually culminate in the new age. Like the eschatologies of all of these religions, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, QAnon, what is it, scientism, right? Like there might very well be like this kind of all of it happening.
Like a mega psyop. Yeah, that's it's not impossible. If you think about the scale of the events, like a 9/11, okay, we know what that did. It created this new post 9/11 world, changed the news cycle for 20 years. Like that, these are major historic turning points. And then we had the C-19, which was global in scale. So if we just look at scaling up a bunch of 9/11 sized events or along those lines, there's really nothing they can't fake. There's really nothing they can't get mass compliance for. And all the religions serve as a subset of government, just like Hollywood and media does. So no, I don't think it's off the table. We might be looking at some kind of psyop Armageddon at some point in the future.
For sure. And I only keep a close eye on the LDS Church because it is very interesting to see how their perception has shifted. I do remember when I was like in high school and such, with the South Park episode, especially it was when Mitt Romney was running, right? Oh, it was just seen as such a laughing stock, such a joke, which, by the way, in Book of Mormon, that's a prophecy, quotation marks. Lehi, who's Nephi's father, he has a vision of people pointing and laughing at the LDS Church. And that's a fulfillment of that prophecy. Look, everyone's laughing at us, this musical, this South Park show, right? But now, it's not so much. I don't see people mocking the LDS Church. In fact, it seems very archaic and old-fashioned and bigoted to be like, oh, don't you know? It's like polygamy and the crazy stuff. Like, well, there's some interesting ideas in Mormonism. And I stress this because even though the LDS Church is only the fourth most popular denomination, it's dwarfed by Catholics, Protestants, and evangelicals in terms of raw numbers of people who identify from it. You shouldn't take that at face value because their number one converts come from those denominations, and they also rapidly reproduce. So you can see how very quickly, those numbers could be flipped.
And one other point about this, because you talk about numbers, when it comes to the limiting factor as to what can be faked, alien invasions, Armageddons, the limiting factor is the credulity of the believers. And if they're just giving birth to more believers, if believers are being reproduced in the schools, indoctrinated to believe things that they're programmed to believe, they can do anything if enough people acquiesce to it. And the non-believers are a marginal fraction, barely even a blip on the radar. Like, we don't even have a platform. So we might think these things are unbelievable, but there's a lot of people who are very willing to believe practically anything.
Yeah, and it doesn't surprise me at all that Candace Owens would call out the LDS element in Turning Point USA because she's agent in place to be painted as extreme.
What do you think about her saying that demons are real and then Tucker Carlson doubling down demons are real? That sounds like a joke, but like, why aren't they laughing?
Well, I think Tucker Carlson did laugh in that documentary. It was like, yeah, this thing just happened. And he like laughed in the documentary. He was talking about getting scratched by a demon. He was laughing about it. And I was like, if that really, supernaturally occurred, I don't think it'd be a very funny thing to recall. But I think they're just bringing it back because America is actually very interestingly, when I was visiting Europe, America is seen as like kind of dumb. Like it's the last vestige of Christianity in the world. Europe is very atheistic, extremely atheistic. America is like the last bit of false Christianity. And I used to think that atheism was going to take over the world. But I have a different perspective now where I think atheism will take over the rest of the world while America will become like the new papacy. Like there will be a new Roman Catholic and it'll be like headed by the LDS Church, which I know sounds crazy, but I thought about this more than 3 years ago. And every single day I get more and more validation for it. The fact that Charlie Kirk was shot in Orem, Utah, which is the middle point between Provo and Salt Lake City, Provo, Utah is where Angel Studios is. Salt Lake City is where the temple is, right? I was like, that can't be insignificant. And then after that event in the world stage, wasn't there a bombing in a Michigan-based LDS?
Yeah, that's right. The truck crashed into it, and the guy was like, "These aren't real." It was a MAGA terrorist attacking Mormons for not being real Christians. That's right. That's correct.
So, and if we assume like the literary analysis, like what is the point of these things? It is painting Mormons as kind of like the very nice, kindly people, and they're just hated by these MAGA band, Bible thumping, like Islamists with the Quran. Right? That's what it seems like with MAGA. And they just quote these scripture out of context. They're beating people over the head with the Bible.
I mean, you've seen those like truck convoys where they have ISIS flags and they've all got their black masks on, and like Allah Akbar. And then you see it contrasted with MAGA with their Trump flags in their trucks in big convoys. I've seen these comparisons, and they're not accidental. These are directly parallels, and these are all caricatures that we've been created with. But yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. It does seem like they have created this dialectic, and the Mormons are interestingly positioned in all this stuff. Like when Tim Ballard, Sound of Freedom, a big Mormon movie studio that's extremely influential among the QAnon people.
I still remember seeing that in theaters, and when I was walking out and on my phone, I was like, who is this Tim Ballard guy? And my jaw just dropping to the ground when I found out that he was Mormon, like an LDS Fed. I was like, no way. I just saw a 2-hour propaganda piece about a Mormon Fed. And this is a year after I'd done such a deep dive into the Book of Mormon and proposed this idea that if the way I interpret Revelation, like if that's true, then America will become like the new papacy. And then I was like, well, what's I don't know. I was like, is there some kind of American Catholicism? And the LDS Church fits it to a T. There's just nothing like it. They have their own government structure. Like Utah is a mini theocracy within the United States already. All of their businesses are closed on Sunday. They call Sunday the Sabbath. They have a living prophet like their Pope. They treat what their LDS president writes like papal bulls. I don't know if you know, papal bulls are like the epistles from the Pope, and Catholics quote the Bible and the papal bulls. Mormons are the same way. And then if you and we both attended LDS Sunday services one time, and it felt like a sanitized version of the Catholic Mass, where instead of people wearing long sacerdotal robes and lush Renaissance paintings and statues, it was very plain. It felt like a courtroom. Everyone's wearing suits, but it had the same ceremony and pageantry of a Catholic Mass, with a little cup with a little bread and water instead of wine. And I was like, what is going on? I was like, is this American Catholicism? Like, what is this?
Yeah, it's kind of a syncretic. It blends a lot of things. It's definitely a blend, but yeah, it has elements of Catholicism. I've always noted the most interesting thing about it is the Masonic aspect. And if you look at Behold a Pale Horse, I think that William Cooper actually published the oaths that they take at the endowment ceremonies. And it's almost word for word the Masonic oaths, just like Knights of Columbus. Knights of Columbus, Mormons, Masonic, you'll find that the oaths to get in and the symbols are essentially the same.
Yeah, and that's even like historically verified. Even LDS members will admit that Joseph Smith, both his brother and his father and him, so like they were all Masons, and Joseph Smith and his followers, they got a very strange treatment where overnight, a lot of them, they skipped the whole initiation, just kind of became, they're part of the Masonic Lodge in Nauvoo, after building the Nauvoo Temple. So, yeah, I mean, like, the connection to Masonry as well is like something that should be more than just a red flag. I'm like, what's the functional purpose of it? And I've always said that when it comes to the world stage, the Masons are like the stagehands. They're the ones who do the city planning. The Jesuits are like the directors, and the screenplay writers are, a certain religious group that is being scapegoated at the moment. You know what I'm saying, right? But it's an amalgamation. It's not one particular group, right? And they have a combination. So it doesn't surprise me at all that the LDS Church would be involved in the stagehand, physically moving, building things part, because Robbie Parker from Sandy Hook is an LDS crisis after family, Robbie Parker's family. You know that he's LDS. I got that from Side Girl or Lynn or Tell. If Lynn's watching, thank you for telling me that. That was the most great connection that Robbie Parker is Mormon. Big thing, right?
Well,
So,
I think there's some. I think that I mean, people think of David Icke as kooky and stuff because of the reptilian thing. But one of the points that he made early on is that if you look at these various supposedly disconnected groups, they're actually compartmentalized. And if you look at them more like as part of the same hierarchy, the idea of the pyramid and the capstone is that the capstone is where all these groups are integrated, and that the agenda is top down and it's just fed through these different conduits. And I think this is a typical thing. So when I talk about these PSYOP scripts, you have the agenda to implement this thing that's going to happen in 20 years. Well, this agenda is top down. It's going to DHS. It's going to the right people in all these different sections, law enforcement, hospitals, the movie directors, and the people who will be performing the fake event on the ground, including media. So I think the pyramidal hierarchical structure goes a long way to explain how these various organizations and religions are ultimately part of the same master plan.
And they're given different orders depending on where they are in the hierarchy. So definitely, it kind of trickles down, top down. And when you get to the lower levels, to some of the media pundits and stuff, they definitely don't have this level of awareness of this kind of stuff. Like Candace Owens is being fed lines to be said, oh yeah, TPUSA is Mormon. Yeah, they're Mormon, and I don't like Mormons and stuff. Like, well, they're not thinking about that kind of level of analysis.
Well, thanks for bringing this to our awareness. Ever since Angel Studios seemed to play such a huge role in the Q PSYOP, I have been looking and thinking, okay, there's got to be some significance to that alone. And I hadn't really looked into them and the relationship with this bigger story with whatever's going on in the Middle East. And it certainly seems like long-term execution of a plan, and all these groups have their parts.
For sure. But thanks for taking my call, and we'll certainly do a deep dive podcast where I structure my thoughts.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do a podcast on it. We'll record it in voice chat, and then I'll throw it into the premieres. I think that's a great way to go in deep dives on various topics. So thanks for the call. Have a great evening.
All right, thank you. Later.
All right, that would be Leo Pirate. Because I think it's useful to talk about the role of religions in the implementation of the big plan. As bread and circuses is both government, well, it's government controlled, religion, news, media, and of course, every other propaganda conduit is used, but religion is not really a blind spot of mine, but I haven't focused enough on it because my focus has been on media as religion. But these other ones are still players because of the influence. The QAnon cult is an example of how susceptible people are to new religious paradigms, which is what it was. It was a cult. It introduced this new Christ coming back story. It didn't come true, but it had tremendous momentum. And then all of a sudden it just ended. Like whatever happened to the Q people and their JFK obsession, it just ended. It's like, oh, let's just give him RFK Jr. and throw him a few bones. All right, well, this has been great. We hit 3 hours, and it looks like maybe that's why it's cutting us off. We're at 3 hours, 3 minutes, and 33 seconds. So we'll continue this conversation tomorrow. Have a great evening.